across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, if I could wish for one thing, it would be inheriting a huge audience from a grateful British public. It's thanks to Mark Dolan for 3 excellent hours here on Talk, and a warm welcome. My name is Johnny, and I'm here until 1 o'clock here on Talk. It's been a brilliant day, hasn't it, for diplomacy. Meanwhile, oh, my mic's fallen off. Oh, that's a good start, isn't it? Yeah, I told you I needed a bit of help here. Hang on now, just see what I can do. I'm not going to blow into it. Dear, oh dear. Dear, oh dear, Richard. Here we go. I tell you what, could you hear me before? Was it worth it? And now my earpiece has fallen out. Good start. Hey, welcome along to the show. It's Johnny here in the chair for Petrie. Bet you're wishing she was here, right? I'm here until 1 o'clock. The only game in town is diplomacy, and that is going on at the White House between Trump and Zelensky and all the rest of our world leaders. Meanwhile, Trump is really teasing all those Western world leaders who are all united in one thing, and that is being the enemy of Putin. And Putin has apparently been in the discussions. He's been in the discussions by phone during the world leadership. 0344 499 1000. What do you think of Donald Trump bringing together all the world leaders for jaw, not war? A ceasefire is really impossible, isn't it? Let's just say ceasefires don't work. We have to get towards a lasting peace. And for that to happen, there have to be security guarantees. And what are security guarantees? As Vice President Garner said once, it ain't worth a pitcher of warm spit, is it? You know, a security guarantee can be reneged on years later when a new president comes into the White House, maybe a Democrat, maybe J.D. Vance has a different view when he gets elected after Trump, or maybe they'll find a Democrat in this strange feral era of changing politics. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We've got great guests coming up who will illuminate us all. We've got Henry Bolton, former leader of UKIP, who's a real expert on the Ukraine-Russia war. He'll have some clarity on that as well. And after 11, to look at the papers, we're going to get the first view of the papers as well. With my presenter's friend tonight, absolutely delighted and honoured to have Jonathan Sacerdotti here in the studio. 0344 499 1000 here on the home of common sense. And it wouldn't be a Monday night without a bit of football as well. We've just had Leeds United play Everton. I think Leeds were winning by 1-0. The Premier League is very much back. Honours on day one to Sunderland as they beat West Ham. And what about the game tonight? Jack Grealish making his Everton debut, coming off the bench for that. A Liverpool fan was arrested and banned from going near any British football stadium within a mile. They don't want him anywhere near any football match at all. And Morecambe can finally start their football season after being saved from collapse. 0344 499 1000. I'm looking forward to your calls between now and 1 o'clock and all these excellent subjects as well. Also, later on, we're going to talk about good PR and bad PR, because there's this suspicion, isn't there? There's this suspicion that Donald Trump only does things for the camera, for awareness, you know, for only those things. He only ever wants to be in the headlines. And we're going to talk to a PR expert later on in the show, Ria Freeman. She's an author, she's an expert on PR. Putin's Friday meeting with Trump, how do you think that went? Was Trump gamed? Does Trump really know? He seems to be aware of what Putin's game is, but is he able to change Putin's ambitions, which are probably to continue his assault on Ukraine, to confirm his seizure of Crimea, and to continue also his assault on Donbass, and maybe even to subsume the Ukraine as well in time. He's a master of buying time. So we'll talk to Henry in just a moment. And
this idea that there's new words, aren't there? Apparently, there are thousands of new words coming into the Cambridge English Dictionary. You'll have heard them all the way through today on Talk. Skibiki, tradwife. What's a tradwife? Sounds like a very attractive thing if you're a middle-aged man, to have a nice tradwife to come home to. And delulo, delusional. Some rather random words added to the dictionary, showing they've predicted staying power, true endorsement of a new word. I mean, that's the thing. Lots of lols as well, LOLZ, that's in there as well. So many words to come. 0344 499 1000. Talk to me, Jonny Gould, right here on Talk. And in just a moment, we'll talk to Henry Bolton as well. Oh, it's really... Tell you what, we're going to have a bit of air conditioning in here. Shall we have a bit of air conditioning? Turn it up? That would be really nice, because I'm steaming through my glasses. That would be a really, really lovely thing to have here as well. And I tell you what else I kind of want to talk to you about. The sort of things that I've sort of noted from all the headlines, and the headlines are going to be made continuously through the next 3 hours. Trump has blamed the war on Biden, not Putin. Okay, it's very easy to blame it on the guy who will never appear in American politics again or on the world stage. But that is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? I mean, to steer away from any blame on Putin is a bit of a stretch, isn't it? And though it's easy for him to kick the backside of the man he vanquished in a second election between the two, or it should say Kamala Harris, but it was Biden with an assist, is an easy one for Biden, and keep on the right side of Putin in the negotiations. Zelensky actually said in the news conference that there will be discussions about territory in a trilateral meeting. What kind of animosity and hatred lies between Zelensky and Putin? I can't imagine it, can you? I mean, it's a wickedness that Putin has exacted on the Ukrainian people. And he'll have to give up territory, all those lives lost, all that generation of Ukrainian lives lost. 0344 499 1000. What does territorial loss mean? Does it mean Russia's aggression will be rewarded with Donbass, with Crimea, because Ukraine risks even greater territorial defeat if it tries to reclaim them back? How can it? Can there be a major drone assault to drive the Russians away? No, there can't. They have effectively won that part of the war, have they? Can this peace summit ever wrought a sovereign state that Ukraine was before 2022? Does it now mean in the 21st century that might is right? What a bitter pill to swallow. And earlier on the Ian Collins show, we had Svetlana Romanko on trading Ukrainian sovereignty. Let's hear what she said to Ian first.
And should the United Kingdom hand over part of Scotland or Cornwall if Putin demands sea routes for his oil and gas in the near future, when he retreats, regroups, and arms for even more? No, because of course no, because it's absurd. Up to international law, to the citizens' beliefs, to everything what is used to be territorial integrity and sovereignty. And of course, it's just an absurd to suggest Ukraine should give up that land, because if Ukraine's sovereignty can be traded away, then no country in the world is safe anymore.
Well, make sure you get onto our YouTube page and hear the rest of that interview, because she wants peace. She wants a sovereign Ukraine. She wants the Ukraine that existed in 2022. But that is now, sadly, the Ukraine of her imagination, because there is absolutely no way that Ukraine will ever be able to restore the borders that it had before. Putin walked into Crimea, the world did nothing, and that is the bitterest pill to swallow. Shall we have a chat now with Henry Bolton? Let's talk to Henry Bolton about this, because Henry is an expert on this situation in the Ukraine. I've spoken to him before here on Talk. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. I mean, what do you make, first of all, of the potential for a trilateral discussion?
Well, that's a difficult one to call, Johnny. It all depends on how things go today. And whether or not Putin will then So what we've got at the moment, we've got the various leaders from Europe, the main sort of leaders who've been supporting Ukraine. We've got the NATO Secretary General, and we've got von der Leyen, who's the President of the European Commission. So they're all trying to support Zelensky in trying to get the message across to Trump that, first of all, that it's unreasonable for Ukraine to hand over territory to Russia. I think they might move on that. There's some flexibility, some limited flexibility on that. But the second thing then is really what the security guarantees are that the European Union is prepared, or the Europeans rather, are prepared to support Zelensky on. And then how Putin responds to that. So, it's a difficult one to call without being a fly in the room on the wall there tonight. But I think ultimately, these summits, the summit that took place in Alaska on Friday, these summits don't take place sort of spontaneously. They're the result of weeks or sometimes months of preparation. So the leaders know what the red lines are. They know what the discussion is likely to be. The discussion's pretty much set out. It's just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So Putin and Trump both went into that meeting on Friday pretty much knowing what they were going to agree to. Now, nothing's really been made public, but we knew before, and now we've heard from Trump subsequently, that it does involve, any peace is going to involve a handover, particularly of Ukrainian territory in Donetsk Oblast. That's significant. We can talk about that if you want.
Yeah.
But
I tell you what, Henry, this is a horrible spectre, isn't it? The reality to end this war is that might is right. The West observed what was happening in Crimea, did very little. On the day of the Olympics in 2008, Russia was fighting a military war in Georgia, wasn't it? Over South Ossetia. And here we are, he's chanced his arm with an Eastern nation which wants to be a Western nation that has adopted the Catholic version of Christmas as opposed to the Russian Orthodox version of Christmas. It wants to become a Western nation. And if you look at the geopolitical map of what it's taken already, it does look like Putin wants the whole of Ukraine. And at the moment, if these talks don't go right, he might go for it.
I actually don't think he does want that, Johnny.
Really?
I think, 2014-15, he went into Crimea and the Donbass. We can go into detail at some point if you wish to, but essentially he went in there to prevent Ukraine that was moving towards the European Union, giving the European Union access to newly discovered gas fields in Crimea or around Crimea in the Black Sea, and shale gas under the Donbass coal basin, which would have meant there is so much there that Russia doesn't need that gas. But to give you an idea how much there was enough gas there, or there is enough gas there to supply Russia's domestic demand and all of its export demand as of 2014, including all of the export to the European Union. That's a hell of a lot of gas. And what if the European Union had got its hands on that gas supply through a friendly sort of Ukraine, then Russia would not have had the same leverage economically, politically, diplomatically over the European Union, the same influence, the same relevance, if you like. So that was really the trigger. We could talk all about that. That's something that's not talked about very much.
No, and I think we should drill down, excuse the pun here, and really try to explain, however nasty the war is, what Russia's motivations were. We can't just talk about this as Ukrainians are victims and that they want to be Western like what we are. We have to talk about Russia. Reports indicate that they've now seized up to 70% of Ukrainian mineral wealth, valued at trillions, in Donetsk and Luhansk. So how might Russia exploit these resources? There's lithium and titanium as well. And when you ask that question, no wonder Donald Trump wanted his control of Russia's minerals, because they realize that if Russia takes them, America is under threat.
Yeah, that's what this is all about, really. It's about those mineral resources, including the oil and the gas. And just to cover the territorial gain and what Putin wants, when he got the Crimea and he got the Donbass, there was absolute. I wrote a paper on it for the European Commission back in 2015, predicting exactly what would happen. He had no choice but to drive down the land sort of corridor, if you like, on the North Sea of the Azov, the north coast of the Azov Sea, which is the North Sea, the north coast of the Black Sea, if you like, to connect Crimea with the Donbass with the Russian Federation. Otherwise, he couldn't sustain Crimea. So that was inevitably going to happen. The West buried its head in the sand over it. Yeah. Now, as for export, this isn't about what, yes, Putin will do a deal with Trump, and I'm sure he's spinning that as much as he can. He'll do a deal with anybody he can to export those minerals once he gets can get them out of the ground. But he can't really get them out of the ground until there is peace. So he needs peace for that purpose. He also needs that territory in Donetsk Oblast in Ukraine that he wants Ukraine to hand over to him, because it is incredibly heavily fortified, and it controls some of the logistical routes that are necessary for him to move those minerals, railway networks and so on. So he needs that for two reasons. One, he needs it to enable him to get at that mineral wealth, and two, he needs to remove really the Ukrainian defensive posture that is sitting right on the borders of where he wants to be. So that's why. If you do, just to talk about that, if that territory is handed over to Russia, then it removes the defensive positions that Ukraine has spent the last 3 years building. So it's that's a significant surrender for the Ukrainians. They're removing their second line of defense that protects the rest of the country. But Jonny, if you go back to this discussion that's been going on, there's been talk about Putin passing a law to make it illegal in Russia for anybody to plan or enact an aggressive war against anybody. There's already such a law. The Americans are saying, well, he's making this offer. Well, it's already a law. It's been a law for a long time under the Criminal Code of Russia, under Article 353. That is a criminal offence, 7 to 15 years in jail for somebody who plans or conducts an aggressive war against a neighbouring another state. It's meaningless. Yeah. Russia drove coach and horses through the Helsinki Final Act, which basically created the confidence and security measures that have kept Europe safe for the last 40 years or so. Yeah. A coach and horses through the Budapest Memorandum, under which Ukraine handed its nuclear arsenal to Russia. There's another agreement as well, the NATO-Russia Founding Act. Nothing that Putin says can be relied upon. No. He has driven a coach and horses through every treaty and every agreement he has made.
So no wonder the security guarantee doesn't mean anything. It looks great on paper, but it doesn't mean anything, does it?
That's why it's so important. And that particularly, you've got Trump who, maybe he wants a Nobel Peace Prize, maybe he doesn't. Obama got one. And I think he does. I think he's got an ego the size of a planet. And I think that's part of the motivation here. Yeah. But he wants to do the art of the deal. It is about Trump. It is about Trump's status and position in the world. This isn't whatever he says, it's not about lives or territory in Ukraine that he's interested in. It's about the legacy that he's leaving. And I genuinely believe that. And so there's a disjoint. And that's why the European leaders are in Washington at the moment, to try and make him aware that the consequences of his self-interest and actions based on that, whether successful in ending the war or not, he's got to bear in mind that the European Union security has got to come first.
Okay, Henry, this is all very interesting. And I also want to understand, getting into the mind of Putin, if it's possible, that actually wars and perpetual motivation to invade and to control, and also perhaps to defend its position against what it sees as NATO defensive aggression, is actually to keep him in power, because if he is not in power, he is a dead man, isn't he? This isn't a guy who's going to happily retire to some quiet dacha in a quiet part of Russia. He will be taken out. He is a dictator with many, many enemies.
Yeah, he is, but then I wouldn't predict that he's a dead man, but I would predict that he maybe wouldn't be able to live quietly without having his hands on the reins of power. But whatever, I mean, Putin, unless he falls over dead, is not going anywhere just yet. So we're stuck with him, and even if he were to go, quite honestly, there is absolutely no sign whatsoever that anybody who is likely to take his place is going to be any sort of more open to peace and cooperation with the rest of the world.
No, there's Medvedev, and there's that awful foreign secretary character that's always there.
Yeah, Lavrov.
Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov.
Yeah, there's a few others, even particularly unsavory people, but you know, the Russian leadership changes have a habit of throwing up an oddball. You know, you never know quite who's going to get into the slot. But the point is that, yes, you raise, Putin has put his economy and his society onto a war footing. Now, in Europe, people don't really realize that. Russia is at war, and they even have a doctrine, which is basically when they go to war at any level, it's a whole of state effort. It's industry, it's the economy, it's the press, it's the education system, it's the healthcare system, it's everything. We're used to fighting sort of smaller wars where the army goes off and does something in Afghanistan or Iraq, and everybody sort of supports them. But actually, the country doesn't change as a result. Russia changes. Its whole machinery swings into action and get behind that effort. And his whole country is at war. Now, when you do that, when there's I think it's about 12 to 13 million Russians are now engaged in producing arms in Russia. Now, if you suddenly end the war and end the reason for the war, or sort of remove the need for those arms. So what do you do with them? Do you just stop producing them? In which case, you've got a whole bunch of unemployed people. Yes. Russia's already got a problem with its pensions. So, yes, Putin has got himself into a situation where it's actually very difficult for him to wind back from all of the rhetoric he's produced, that NATO's the enemy, the West's the enemy, the European Union's the enemy, the Americans the enemy. It's going to have an interesting time saying, well, actually, now it's all changed, except by saying, because I'm the strong man and because I went into Ukraine. And we're going to have to sort of entrench ourselves in that sort of attitude towards the West. So this is a very difficult situation, and I fear this is my fear, Johnny, that where we're going with this is Trump doesn't get this. For Trump, it's about peace today rather than securing peace tomorrow, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, because his motivation is towards his own status, his own domestic politics, whereas Putin's is, their interests align, but Putin's are more expeditionary, they're more expansionist, whilst having to cater for a very different political crowd back in Russia. An agreement of the sort that's being talked about at the moment, the territory exchange, the minerals deal and everything else, Putin wins, Trump wins, Ukraine loses. And if Ukraine loses, then Putin is emboldened. And if Putin is emboldened and he's got this big war machine pumping out arms, he's going to have the military that what do you do? Every time a nation has mobilized to the extent that Russia has done, and then they end that mobilization, they send people home, they have a problem with unemployment. Happened here after World War I, happened here after World War II, it happened here after the Napoleonic Wars. It happens every time. He'd have another problem at home, which he doesn't want. So I cannot see him drawing down on this militarization of the Russian Federation.
This is like the diplomacy of the 19th century and Otto von Bismarck, where the French and the Prussian were at permanent wars. It's like we've regressed back to the sort of monarchies and the strongmen and the unilateral leaderships before the First World War. It's gone back in our lifetime.
Indeed, and we've got to be very careful because, and that's the problem, because actually for the Russians and for Putin, he harks back to that sort of era almost, as to when Russia was great, and it's still great in many respects, but he's not doing it any favors. But after World War I, we had the Versailles Treaty, where the European powers got around the table and decided how the defense security architecture and the borders of Europe were going to look after World War I. And with every good intention, they designed into that a whole bunch of flaws. They humiliated the Germans, and they put onerous demands upon the German state. And that created the foundations, the conditions, if you like, for World War II.
For Nazism and for Hitler, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So the rise of Nazi Germany can be traced directly back to the Versailles Treaty. And what I'm fearful of is that Trump, in his domestic and egotistical drive to achieve a peace, and the world, particularly the European populations, including those in the UK, are so eager to get peace now that we actually design a peace that is flawed and leads us to a war later. Now, nobody can accuse me of being a warmonger if they know anything about my history and my background and what I've been through and what I've seen and experienced myself. I am not. I want peace, but that's where I am on this, Johnny.
Yes,
You've
peace
got
through strength and through...
Yeah, well, it's got to be well designed. We've got to think about the future security when we're dealing with today's security. Otherwise,
I hope we've got the leadership in the 21st century to do that. I look around them and I worry that we might not. Henry Bolton, OBE, SDP spokesman for Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security, a pleasure to have you on the show and open up. If you'd like to comment on anything that Henry has said, 03444991000. The talk is always of ceasefire, stop killing, but we need a well-designed peace. That is the one thing that Trump has said. No point in going for a ceasefire, even though that is appealing, we stop the killing, but it only manifests itself in more war. Can we design a peace that really creates a sovereign Ukraine, a non-aggressive Russia, and a peace in that part of Europe without threat to countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Sweden, Germany? 03444991000. A warm welcome to your Monday evening. I'm Jonny Gould and this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a very good evening to you. My name is Jonny Gould and this is Talk. I'm in for Petrie tonight. She's got a bit of a sore throat. She'll be back again tomorrow, all being well. Now listen, I went to Airborne at the weekend. What's Airborne? It's a fantastic show on the seafront at Eastbourne where the Red Arrows turn up and all the great RAF aeroplanes from yesteryear and even today, some really, really thunderous planes creating sonic booms over Marks and Spencer even in Eastbourne was there, and it brought hundreds of thousands of people to town for this amazing spectacle. And those of you who know Eastbourne, it's a good traditional old English town, and the thousands of people that came through the station were not greeted with the bonhomie of the seafront. They were greeted by an almighty noise from quite a small bunch of protesters, Palestine protesters, and it was a bit noisy and a bit ugly, and some people didn't like it, some people just walk through and don't want to be involved in it. But it wasn't the greatest introduction to the town of Eastbourne. Of course, we are a free country and everyone is entitled to such protests. But it did strike me that it's a sign of the times, that the majority of people were just there for a leisure weekend, miles away from the political discourse of another country, and then this was going on. And there's a schism in our society, isn't there? There's chalk and there's cheese. And my question for you, and please book your call now, 0344 499 1000. We're going to take calls after midnight. Do you think society is coming apart? Do you think at some point in the future some kind of reality will bring us together? How far apart can we go? Do you think twice before you say what you think, even to people who you thought perhaps had similar thoughts and ideas to you, but suddenly you're finding, actually, I think I'm on the other side to you? The question I'm asking tonight, have you lost lifelong friends over politics? 0344 499 1000. You can text us as well at 87222. You can tweet us or X us, whatever it's called these days, at talkTV and at Jonny Gould as well. And I'd love to take your calls and your texts throughout the show. And coming up at 11 o'clock, I'll have Jonathan Sacerdotti here in the studio. We'll talk about the Trump-Zelensky meeting. We'll talk about Gaza as well. Jonathan is an expert on the Middle East. We'll talk about the royal family because Jonathan fancies all that as well. He likes all that. So Jonathan will be in as well, talking about Meghan and Harry. That's always popular, isn't it? And this PR business, we're going to have Rhea Freeman in as well. And she is a professional PR expert on social media as well. Everyone's made a cock up on social media along the way, haven't they? Putting up pictures they shouldn't have done or saying things that they shouldn't have done. I'm thinking Lucy Connolly at the top of my head there. Putin's Friday meeting with Trump. Who won that? Is Henry Bolton right that Trump is only about the headlines, only about appearing as high up, only trying to create a legacy, only trying to win the Nobel Peace Prize? Is he the man to design a peace? Was it right for Starmer, Macron, Meloni and all the other characters from the European Union to come to the White House basically to protect their mate Zelensky against an onslaught that we saw in February, where Trump turned him in his second language to Zelensky, saying, "You're gambling with World War III," and all this kind of thing, bullying the guy and then turfing him out. I mean, really, what a spectacle that was. 0344 499 1000. So, you know, have you lost friendships that you had for many years over politics? Would love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000, and you can do that with us after midnight right here on the home of common sense. And in just a moment we'll have a chat football, because Leeds United have played Everton tonight. Sunderland produced the great performance on the first Saturday of the afternoon. We had a bit of racism born with a new way of dealing with racism. We're coming down on that like a ton of bricks. And we've got Alex, 3 Lions Irons, right after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a warm welcome to Talk Tonight. I'm Jonny Gould. I'm in for Petrie. She's back tomorrow. Mark Dolan's in all week as well, between 7 and 10. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to talk football now with Alex, Three Lions Irons. Why is your nickname?
Good evening. I can't remember. I think it was something to do with the England Euros 3 years ago when I started doing, or whenever it was I started to do these little reporter slots. I can't remember why it's Three Lions, but I like it. So
it's who you are, and
exactly.
It's fantastic. And it also reminds me of the Bob Marley song, Iron Lions Iron.
Okay.
A little bit like that.
Yeah, okay. I'll go with that.
Now, listen, tonight, Leeds United against Everton. Leeds' first game in the Premier League for 2 years, and it finished?
It finished 1-0 to Leeds. They were mostly on top, especially during the first half. Everton never really got out of first gear. And they did start to try and get back into the game into the second half, but a penalty given away by Tarkowski, the Everton defender. A bit of a harsh one. The ball's come through, deflected off a defender, deflected off another Everton defender, and hit Tarkowski on the arm as he's trying to hold it to his body.
Yeah.
And normally those aren't given as a penalty, especially with VAR and new rules coming in. If your arm is close to your body, they tend to let you get away with that, and if your body is in an unnatural position, that's when a penalty is more likely to be given. But the referee had said penalty, VAR confirmed that decision, and Leeds were able to leave Ellen Road on their first game back in the last couple of years in the Premier League with all 3 points.
A clean sheet, and Daniel Farke's been very, very busy in the transfer market. He's brought in a lot of players who are 6'2". Is Mike right? Is that how they're going to stay up? Is that how they're going to finish fourth bottom?
It could well be. It could well be. It's nice to know that if I was a professional player, I wouldn't get into Daniel Farke's side, as I'm only 5'7".
Okay.
They did play very, very well. It was a bit of a slow game, to be fair. Everton not really up to scratch. Jack Grealish came on as a substitute for the last 25 minutes, but they never really looked up to scratch, whereas Leeds looked hungry. Of course, they're at home. Their fans expecting Leeds to really do something and kick on from last season going into this season, and they're doing exactly that. And they weren't the only team to come up from the Championship to win on the weekend. Sunderland did that as well, again in front of an expectant home crowd. They beat West Ham 3-0
They thrashed
at
them.
home. They absolutely
And they gave them a
thrashed them.
hiding.
They really did. Not Daniel Farke, Graham Potter, of course, the manager of West Ham. West Ham fans are already starting to say that enough is enough. We need a new manager. He's not playing the West Ham way, whatever that means. Well, at the moment it means they might get relegated.
Yeah,
but
West Ham eventually get relegated. It's like it's like a cast iron law, isn't it?
Yeah,
eventually.
Eventually.
And this is the question I wanted to draw you to. I mean, it's always the bottom three, asterisk. Occasionally there are sides that stay up and do well.
It has been over the last couple of years, for sure.
Which is very, very disappointing. However, a great start, particularly by Sunderland. Well done to Leeds United tonight. Do you think there are enough established sides in the Premier League to go down at the end of the year? West Ham as well is one of them. Wolves has got to be another.
Yes, I don't think the three sides that came up will
Burnley
stay up.
down, aren't
I
they?
reckon, as a Fulham fan, we have reservations over Scott Parker, and especially in the Premier League as a manager, he doesn't seem to be quite up to the cut.
Right.
In regards to going defensively, brilliant, and that's how Burnley went up last year. It was their defensive record that kept them up. But whether that will work in the Premier League, that's to be seen. Of course, Burnley lost 3-0 to Spurs on Saturday on the opening weekend. I think the relegation battle could be tasty this season. As you mentioned, Wolves and West Ham. I reckon Brentford are going to struggle as well.
Really?
They look poor against Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest were dominant against them on Sunday. Keith Andrews' first game in charge of Brentford wasn't the best start for them.
Wrong choice for manager.
I can see why they've done it. They wanted to move someone who's internal up into the role of manager to give them a chance.
Thomas Frank under Dean Smith.
Exactly. So that's the way the Brentford work, especially if they try and work this Moneyball way of managing into the Premier League. And we've seen Brighton do it, and now in regards to the Moneyball stuff, and now we're seeing Brentford take it one step further with internal movement in regards to staff. And I don't know if this is the right time to bring Keith Andrews in. He's an unproven manager in the Premier League, but then it could be, you know, Brentford always have a way of turning things around, and they could finish mid-table. Although their Visser, Ivan Visser, their want-away striker, who's been looking at going to Newcastle over the summer, he has removed all association with Brentford on his Instagram account as his unfuture future takes a new fresh twist.
Right, because that's how these big players now get moves. They
act
fall
like a
out.
5-year-old.
Yeah, they throw their toys out the pram and put their houses up for rent because you don't buy them anymore because they're only there for 3 years and you can't sell anything on the Wirral anymore or in St James's Park.
In Brentford you might, but
well, that's also true. Yes, indeed. As long as you're away from the A4 flyover, you'll be fine. Now, Villa and Newcastle fans joined forces in fiery chants during Saturday's opener at Villa Park, chanting, "Greedy and corrupt, you're killing the game," and it was aimed at the Premier League. Supporters of both clubs are fed up with the league's profit-first approach. They've demanded fairness, and Villa and Newcastle have a point. The irony is that they were involved in the transfer pretty much of the same day of Jacob Ramsey,
yes,
who'd been at Villa since he was 6 years old, has been forced to be sold effectively to Newcastle for £43 million, including all those add-ons. Newcastle are in the Champions League and they beat Villa on goal difference to get there last season. So how I think this is going to manifest itself is that the gap between the top four and the rest, and then the sides at the bottom, will be huge.
Yeah,
there'll be
I agree with
5
that.
clubs maybe on, like, I don't know, 80, 90, 100 points, and then, you know, 6th place will be on 75. There'll be a big gap, won't there?
I don't think it'll be. It probably won't be that big.
Really,
but
I'm worried about it.
I agree. I think it'll be the clubs that are in the Champions League and will keep making money to kind of stay in line and beat those PSR rules, whereas you've got teams that, you know, we support Villa and Fulham, and Brighton and Brentford, all the teams that are coming up in the middle that won't be able to keep up, but the only real movement for them will be downwards. But then you've got the clubs who are coming up from the Championship who might not be able to keep up either. So essentially the Premier League is going to be split in two, with the teams that get into the Champions League and into Europe every year, and the ones that don't, and the ones that will be kind of sitting around a mid-table wondering how they're going to push up into the higher echelons of the league, and the ones that come up wanting to break through but not necessarily having the funds and the power to do so. It could essentially split the league in 3.
Yes, a couple of big stories coming up. I must salute Bournemouth, because it wasn't so very long ago that I was watching them in a League One game thinking, well, it's a lovely place for a holiday, but now it's a lovely place to sell players to Real Madrid, PSG and Liverpool for a combined £147 million. What on earth has happened at Bournemouth to create this very impressive football club? Very impressive.
Good management, essentially the same way that Brighton and Brentford have been doing it.
Management.
Buying in players that look good at clubs that they know they can buy on the cheap, get them to have a couple of good seasons at Bournemouth, and then they know they can sell them on to Real Madrid, Liverpool, as we've seen, and then they can still, like, play it with the big boys. They drew 2-2 with Liverpool.
Brilliant result.
On Friday night.
Well, no, they lost 4-2.
Sorry, yes, I remember it being 2-2.
You watched it till the 87th minute,
I watched it till the 82nd minute. I went, oh no, they've drawn, and then that's it.
So
I remember the 2-2. I was weird enough. I was at the pub, so that's why I've forgotten that. But up until that point, they did lose 4-2.
Yeah.
But they got it back to 2-2, and they were brilliant. And they were very, very unlucky to get pipped at the end by 2 goals that Liverpool had scored. Salah, of course, scoring an emotional goal to remember Diogo Jota. But Bournemouth have been, over the past couple of years, they have been sensational. They have bounced up and down between the Championship and the Premier League in recent years, but they're always there or thereabouts. And again, like I said, they can really punch above their own weight, and they're one of the clubs that will threaten the European places, but just not quite have enough to get there, like Brentford, like Fulham.
What do you think of the new racism protocols now? Because they halted the game. Semenyo, who was motivated by it to score 2 goals, reported the guy who said something to him off mic, and the game came to a standstill, and the cops got him out, and they halted the whole game. That's how it's going to be now. And of course they've thrown the book at him, and they've told him he's banned from football. He's banned from going near football grounds, even on a wet Tuesday afternoon, within a mile. So racism is not cool. What do you think of this new protocol?
There's no visits to Stoke then on a wet Tuesday night for sure. But I was at a game on Saturday afternoon where something similar happened.
Right.
So I was at an FA Cup preliminary round game between Edgware and Kingsbury and Whitstable, and there was a fan behind the goal who was shouting out, mouthing out racist abuse towards, I think towards the away side, who were Whitstable. Referee stopped the game. The players came over and said, look, this guy's saying stuff that is racist towards us. The referee then went to the benches, asked if they were okay to keep playing the game, and then asked the coaching staff from the home side to remove the spectator. There's no police, there's no stewards in the grounds, in the facility, because it's a first, it's a preliminary round in an FA Cup tie. The team themselves only get about 50 supporters in, and there's not normally any trouble. So it took a little bit longer to remove the guy who was causing the problems, but it was a similar protocol. Game was stopped until it was dealt with, and then the game resumed. And I think that should be how it goes going forward, especially if it's upsetting players on the pitch. They want to play football. Everyone just wants to watch the game as it unfolds. Edgware, to be fair, were already 8-0 down, 9-0 down by this point, so they got absolutely beaten. They were blown off the pitch by Whitstable in the end, and it really ruined the atmosphere.
Yes, I'm sure.
So to have one, even if it's just one person causing trouble, I think it's the right thing to stop the game, get them removed from the ground if they can, and then resume play, and hopefully the players can forget about it and
move on. I hope that the Wealdstone Raider, you want some, is not outlawed, because we need characters like that.
I'm from Harrow,
right?
And I've heard that he is normally around the town centre, but I'm also a Harrow fan, and Harrow and Wealdstone don't like one another. So whenever I hear the Wealdstone Raider, I'm just like, oh no. But at least he's selling Itsu now, so there's always an advert of him selling dumplings on Instagram.
That's
Have you not seen it?
I haven't seen it. I'm actually going to rush to YouTube after the Eddie show and look at that one.
You want dim sum? I'll give it you.
Alex 3 Lions Irons, you want some? Thanks very much indeed for joining us here on the show. It's Talk. I'm Jonny Gould. See you in a bit.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, book your call for after midnight, 03444991000. Have you lost a lifelong friend, or a friend you've had for a number of years as an adult, because of politics? We live in a schismatic time. We live in a time where society is coming apart. I saw that for myself at Airborne, which brought hundreds of thousands of people into Eastbourne via the station, there for a leisurely weekend, and then the Palestine March was going on, making an awful racket by the side. Not many of them, but there they were, and most of the people didn't want to pay attention to it and just move to the seafront and enjoy the festivities. And I'm just wondering whether you have found along the way your own personal experience. Have you lost friends and friendships from people who you felt you had a great kinship with, but you don't have anymore? 03444991000. Book your call now. That's after midnight. And Jonathan Sacher-Dotti will be with me after the 11 o'clock news as we look through all the news stories of the day, and we cannot ignore the revolving and roaming news that's continuing between Trump and Zelensky and all the European leaders at the White House today. This is the home of common sense, and now let's talk PR, good PR and bad PR, and say a warm welcome to Ria Freeman. Hello, Ria.
Hello there.
So, hi, Ria. Listen, now Henry Bolton was on before saying Donald Trump is only in it to be on our screens and to kind of set up his legacy for the rest of the world. He's not really in it to find a peaceful solution. I mean, he is the ultimate PR king. He became president based on the back of a kind of PR assault, a social media assault. Do you agree with that? Is that what Trump's all about, or is there a feeling person, a president for the world in there?
I don't think we see a whole lot of that. I do think we see the kind of showman, the PR side. And actually, if we look at his meeting with Putin last week, meeting with the leaders, Zelensky and the other leaders today, well, tomorrow, today, yesterday, all of the days, it is very much for show, isn't it? Rolling out the red carpet for Putin, clapping when he arrived. Today they had the kind of family photograph with all the different leaders lined up. It does feel like there's a lot of sort of showmanship about it, which do we really want that when we're talking about wars and horrific things that have happened across the world? I'm not really sure we do.
Yes, he just uses any opportunity in the Oval Office to talk about his great achievements, whether right or wrong, or whether true or not. Condimanics, we're battling with so many new words. Let's have a look at this one. Apparently, these chaps they went down Jeremy Clarkson's pub and realised that Clarkson didn't sell any ketchup at the Farmer's Dog or the Diddley Squat pub because he couldn't find a 100% British sourced one. So they've made one, they've launched it in the shop last week, they've documented their journey on TikTok, and it's been excellent PR for them and indeed Clarkson. It's amazing what TikTok and social media can do. Amazing.
It absolutely is. I mean, all credit to them because they saw the opportunity there. There's big signs around Clarkson's pub saying we don't sell ketchup. Can't get 100% British ketchup, we're not selling it. And they jumped on that. They developed British ketchup. They also showed how difficult it was to make, which I, to be honest, did not realise how difficult it would be. But they've documented it, they've shared it, they took it over last week. They had some social media done with Lisa. They've done such a good job. Not only is it good for them as a brand, because they're also selling that product and other products that they make to to their customer, but also from kind of Clarkson's point of view, helping a small business, really living by that 100% British pledge he made. I think it ticks so many boxes, and at a time when British farmers are really, really struggling as well, because the harvest is going to be really challenging for lots of different people because of the weather.
I hear there's a shortage of broccoli on the way.
I saw that and I thought, oh, my kids will be there clapping that on.
This is bad news in our house for my missus. She lives by broccoli.
Honestly, my kids will be thrilled.
Something wrong with her.
No, I think it ticks so many boxes.
Yeah.
It's a really nice story, and they've done so well jumping on that too.
And talking of that, can we talk about Strictly briefly? Because there's this bloke who I've been watching on social media for a long time. He goes, "Hey, boss, I'm with my lovely wife and I'm having a fantastic time and you have a lovely day and you're smashing." And he's a complete product of social media. He just would not have been famous 15 years ago. I'm talking about Tom Skinner. Now he's taking on dancing Bosch. It's just amazing how powerful social media is above even television, and now that thing will take him into being a household name. People didn't hear about him before, now they'll hear about him.
Completely. Social media is so powerful, and it's powerful for good and bad reasons. We can see lots of stories that sort of gather momentum when they shouldn't do. There have been different situations where there's been a rumour about something and people have blown it up and started accusing everybody and anybody of it. It can also be really, really positive. And I think the key really is to remember its power. It can make people, obviously you mentioned somebody there. We've got people like Mrs. Hinch, who I think she used to be a hairdresser and started sharing how she cleaned her house. And now she's got ranges with, amazing companies in shops. It's just a different world. But it's kind of nice in some ways because it does allow people who have got a genuine passion or skill or that people can relate and connect to become something different, to be, to fulfill that gap in people's lives, I guess.
It's so true. And I mean, like, when you look back 15 years ago, someone like Levi Roots with his reggae sauce had to get Peter Jones to be grumpy at him. "I'll give you £200,000 for a 10% stake in the business." But all that's gone now because basically what Levi could have done was had his little sing-song on TikTok these days and probably done a similar job with the right activity. There's been a communications revolution in between Levi Roots and these ketchup manufacturers from Diddley Squat.
Absolutely. I mean, and Levi could have kept probably a lot more of his company as well if he'd have done.
Yes, probably. That's right. Now, the other thing about the modern day is that there are a huge, it's basically an engine room for creating new words. So we've got skibiki, a tradwife, and delulu. Delulu is basically short for delusional. Tradwife, to someone of my age, sounds extremely appealing. What is a tradwife?
It is a traditional wife.
Amazing.
So there's a kind of whole movement around it, which some people view quite positively, some people view very, very negatively. But the kind of interesting thing is that this has now been adopted as one of the 6,000 new words in the Cambridge Dictionary, which just, I think, proves, well, I mean, it's great PR for the word.
6,000 new words?
Yeah, I'm sure it was that. I wrote it down and I checked it.
That's outrageous. How many words are there?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how many we all use on a daily basis, and some of them are crazy words.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out I've written skibidi down on my notes because I thought if I get asked that, I'm never going to remember it.
This is good news for Susie Dent at Countdown, isn't it? Because it'll keep her on overtime.
Absolutely. And if they do get kind of influencers and perhaps people that have made their name through social media on, maybe they'll be better with these kind of words as well, because a lot of these have originated from social media trends and kind of the way that the world has developed from that side of things too.
I'm going to say something else here as well. That, you know, Countdown's got 9 letters in it. That's the game. They'll have to make it up to 11 to make it more complicated.
Have to up the game.
Yeah, they just have to up the game. Absolutely. What an interesting discussion. Ria Freeman, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Talk. A very good evening to you. My name is Jonny Gould and here we are at Talk. Listen, we've got a really, really good hour coming up as well with Jonathan Sacerdoti. We'll talk about all the headlines that are being made this minute in Washington, D.C., and that will doubtless be made as the hour continues, as Zelensky and Western Europeans elite meet Donald Trump to try and protect the Ukrainian leader. Jonathan Sacerdoti coming up, and your calls after midnight as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I feel suitably warmed up now and been in the chair now for about an hour. This is your Talk. I'm Jonny Gould and I'm here until 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. Sounds a bit dramatic tomorrow morning, but it's a fact, ladies and gentlemen. And, I've got to say, we truly have a revolving story, because we've got news conferences, we've got statements coming out for the next few hours, because Washington, D.C. is 5 hours behind us. So it's kind of drive time over in the United States, and the kind of best parts of the discussions have been had. What I would love to be is a fly in the room, because apparently Donald Trump, according to Bild, the German newspaper, he phoned up his mate in Moscow, Putin, while Mark Rutte and Meloni and Starmer and Macron were all sitting there, and they had to talk to him. Yeah, we've got to talk to my great friend. He's my great friend. And there's been some great headlines. So, for example, Trump blaming Biden instead of Putin for the war. That is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? 03444991000 if you want to talk about any of the stories today. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jonathan Sacerdoti to the studio. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Johnny. Good to be back with you. I'm well. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. I'm really good. And it is wonderful to be involved in a story which continues as we speak. And basically, Starmer and Macron, who aren't really henchmen in the truest sense of the word, were definitely called to be there to defend their man, the Ukrainian leader Zelensky, to make sure that we didn't have a repeat of what happened in February, saying you're gambling with World War III and turfing him out of the White House. But I think Trump was really on best behaviour anyway, wasn't he, today?
It's really been a really different visual to the last time Zelensky was there, and I think both of them were making an effort. You saw Zelensky thanking him a few times during that Oval Office moment, and also wearing sort of a suit. I'm not sure I would have got away with that for my bar mitzvah, but it was a suit for Zelensky at any rate.
Need a tie for a bar mitzvah always. Now, listen, everyone wants lithium these days, don't they? I mean, that is the kind of basis of the Third World War, isn't it? Which is why I actually thought that in February, Zelensky, even though he'd been turfed out and it looked like he'd been humiliated, actually won, because waiting for him in the room next door was a nasty little contract with probably some clauses added last minute for security guarantees in exchange for America plundering some of their best resources, whereas he wouldn't be moved and he left, or at least he got kicked out. So though the visuals of it looked like he'd been humiliated by Vance and all the media that he'd invited, actually he'd put off this deal with Trump in exchange for security back in February. He's his own man, Zelensky.
Certainly he's stayed very tough during this whole war, and for that I think much of Europe admires him greatly. But of course it doesn't look like it's going to go that well either at the moment. We have
He's
Zelensky,
losing, isn't he?
And we have him saying that there will be no territorial concessions, but I can't see at this stage how that is possibly going to happen. If there's going to be peace, or if there's going to be an end to the war, or even a ceasefire. Trump said he doesn't want a ceasefire, he wants to go straight for the whole thing, for the end of the war, for peace. Any of those, I think, will inevitably involve some form of territorial concessions. I think more or less everybody seems to accept that, perhaps except for Zelensky in public.
And yet he did say that at a trilateral meeting there would be territory discussed.
Yes. So, well, I mean, what we're seeing now is all these bits being drip-fed out, and we don't know what's going on in there. I think it would be fascinating to be a fly on the wall. So we saw that earlier in public, but then the private conversations with some details changed. And as you said, we understand that Donald Trump paused the meeting to phone Putin. So in a way there is kind of shuttle diplomacy going on already, and for that reason I think it was important that all of the European leaders were there, not just for the visual of showing the strength after that moment where Putin and Trump met, which seemed, many said, to be rewarding Putin for having acted as he has over recent years, but now he seemed to be doing the other side, to invite the Europeans, to invite Zelensky, to make a very, very deliberate show that everyone is getting on well, and that Trump is the man in between who's able to broker peace, he hopes, between these warring sides. And I think that is ultimately what underlies much of what Trump's been doing in foreign policy. He frames absolutely everything he does in terms of making peace. He wants that Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
And he wants it for making peace, not just in one place. He kept saying today's ended 6 wars. He then flirted with the idea of starting one around the next election when Zelensky said he couldn't hold elections during a war. So it's not quite clear what Donald Trump is doing, but I do think that he's acting impressively as a broker of at least talks between warring nations.
No confirmation from the truth behind the Putin said, I know what is happening, I'm already listening. Apparently that wasn't the case. But I want to say this to you, which is that I am one of those people that likes to listen to the rambling Trump news conferences because I find him endlessly fascinating, the way that he casually talks in a way that a politician just never talks. Exactly the same way that I used to listen to Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, because he was endlessly wise about football. He just knew everything about it, and he used to involve himself in everyone else's business, and it was none of his goddamn at Manchester United. So Trump said about 9 months ago, when he finally agreed the minerals deal with Zelensky, they said, what happens if Putin invades and steals your minerals? Will you need boots on the ground to protect your American workers in Ukraine? And he basically sat back and said, no, that won't happen. That won't happen. You know, those American guys, they're there. That won't happen. And that is interesting, because that is the story of America's post-war expansionism in terms of soft power and commercial power around the world. I'm thinking of things like McDonald's and Blue Jeans and Hollywood. Soft power and hard power around the world. If it's working from American money in your country, Ford at Dagenham, etc., no one's going to come near it. He is creating peace around the world because he is a post-war animal of American capitalism. He's not just about peace, Trump. He's about the tabernacle of commerce around the world.
Well, Trump obviously has a background originally not in politics, so he does seem to come at geopolitics in particular from a commercial and showbiz perspective, which is more his background. Some would argue he was more showbiz than actually business in terms of his success and his notoriety. But I'd say he's both, and that's not, from my part, that's not really meant as an insult. I think it provides, as you said, a really interesting and sometimes refreshing approach. When we look at those press conferences, I mean, the one that happened not that long ago with Sir Keir Starmer in Scotland, so Trump's home territory, because it was his place.
Yeah, come to my place.
Right, and it looked just like, you know, those Oval Office meetings, because he was, you know, in a suitably grand room, and they'd arranged it more or less the same way. And then you saw really the contrast between the two men. So Trump has been much mocked for his style of speaking and thinking, but actually, when I watched the two of them, one of them seemed much more relaxed and normal, and he was in our country doing that.
Yeah.
The other seemed wooden, rehearsed, nasal.
And defensive. Actually, Sadiq Khan's my friend.
Right. And
he's doing a nasty job. He's a nasty man. That was amazing.
And I really think that to me is one of the things that I actually like about Donald Trump, is he does say quite often what he's thinking. He often also in those press conferences completely refuses to answer the question that he's been asked and goes off on a tangent, but it's a skill and it's not accidental. The man in his second term, I think, is far more skilled and far more considered in how he operates. In those press conferences, they last forever. I can't remember another American president or politician anywhere that I'm familiar with who will speak endlessly, unprepared apparently. I'm sure he is prepared, but just openly and endlessly he'll argue with journalists in the room, or he'll ask them about their families and what they're doing. The man does seem to have a charisma that touches ordinary people in how he speaks to them. And I will say that for all his faults, that's one of the things I like about him. And I think that maybe we see it here in a much smaller way in people like Farage, who I think has also an ease when he's on camera.
Great communicator.
Exactly. So I think maybe we are moving from an era of very, very prepared and rehearsed and practiced messaging that sort of came to the fore during the Blair era and then has carried on all the way through in terms of how politicians communicate. I mean, even David Cameron and Theresa May, they had these very robotic, pre-prepared versions of every answer they could give or refuse to give. Trump doesn't seem to care. He'll tell you really what he thinks and he'll argue with you.
Yes.
I think there is something quite interesting
it's
about
refreshing. That. The other thing is, I hear this all the time, that Trump is unpredictable. You never know what he's going to do. And actually, I think he has some pretty basic principles. And though you might not expect something to come out of his pisk like that minute, actually what he's saying is consistent with what he believes. He's not that unpredictable, Jonathan.
I would say that's probably true. I'd say sometimes he doesn't speak in detail. So a lot of the time what he says isn't necessarily quite what he means. So the gates of hell will open, or I will end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Those sorts of things I think we've had to learn don't necessarily mean what they actually say, but they do point towards what he really feels and thinks and says, and I think in that respect he is consistent. You're right. I think a lot of the time there are some inconsistencies. Of course, people can find them as well between what he says one moment and another, but generally speaking I think his guiding principles seem to be the same, and how he dresses them up, as I said before, I think in terms of peace, in terms of stopping killings, sparing lives, sparing bloodshed, these appear to be his messages. And if ever he has top-line PR advice, those seem to be the bits that he puts on top of everything else. And underneath that, he's very open about making everything a deal in a sort of commercial sense. That's perhaps also his weakness as well as a strength, because I think people like Putin and Islamist terrorists like Hamas, and even the Iranians who are driven not by commercial thoughts, but the Islamic Republic of Iran, I should say, are driven more by their messianic apocalyptic visions in a religious sense. So sometimes that commercial approach actually isn't going to win out over what we might in the West consider to be more unhinged or ruthless or calculated Machiavellian ideas in terms of geopolitics. But it's definitely an interesting approach, and sometimes it takes an interesting and unusual approach to break a deadlock.
We'll talk about Islamism, we'll talk about Iran, and we'll talk about Zara Sultana and her extraordinary statements about being an anti-Zionist, and you can quote me on that, or you can print that, which is what many people have done. But let's have a quick look through some of the front pages that are knocking around. The Washington Post has the US is ready to give Ukraine robust security pledge, with land concessions seen as a key to peace. That is the Washington Post. And in the Sun, after that dressing down, Zelensky, well, it's comparatively smart, as Jonathan said, for his Trump summit. US will protect Ukraine's security. Suited, not booted, is the clever headline from the Sun this morning. And they're having a laugh on the front of the Daily Telegraph. Here it is, US military to protect Ukraine. I mean, that is the stereotype picture of Donald Trump with his hands together, as he so much does, and there he is, I think, laughing about the suit that he was wearing. No tie, but it'll do. Zelensky and Trump bury the hatchet in the Oval Office as the US president agrees to provide security after a peace deal. No need for a ceasefire, says The Guardian, to secure Ukraine peace deal. And I think that's a very poignant headline from The Guardian, because they always go about ceasefires without any consequence, because what is a ceasefire? It's the starting gun for the next war, isn't it, eh? I mean, we need peace. We need to negotiate a final military victory, don't we? That's the way you negotiate. I think Hamas are becoming a little bit more flexible in their negotiations because Israel's giving them a final hiding in Gaza. We'll talk about that as well a little bit later on in the hour. The Daily Star, well, it's come for a slightly different story here. Big cat stalks King Chaz. How dare you call me King Chaz? A monstrous big cat has been seen stalking the countryside close to the Highgrove home of King Chaz. Beast spotted prowling near Highgrove home, and we move straight on to the iPaper, where Trump's White House welcome, we can still do a deal with Putin. Some lovely pictures here. America pledges to help out Europe with Ukraine's security. 7 European leaders, including Starmer, held talks in Washington to back Ukraine. Trump claiming Putin is waiting for my call and may join a trilateral summit with Zelensky. And it was electric with jeopardy, a chess match with live grenades. In the Daily Mail, says Quentin Letts, he survived the Ukrainian president's Oval Office rematch, passed without diplomatic incident. And your pink, the FT, Trump floats prospect of US security guarantee in a bid to end the nuclear Ukraine war. There we go. Don't use the N-word. Don't use the N-word, I just use the N-word. Zelensky returns to the Oval Office. He pushed for a meeting with Putin. Europeans add support for Kiev. Jonathan, the idea that Putin in a New York minute would agree to a security deal is, as Henry Bolton said, of no use at all, because he rides coach and horses through every agreement, through every thing. I mean, it would take an awful lot of security on these borders, thousands and thousands of miles, stretching down from the Baltic states right through Belarus, through Ukraine, maybe even to Poland and some of the other former Soviet bloc countries. He is a threat, isn't he? He is a threat. He's a threat.
The fact that this is the front page of virtually every newspaper, except perhaps for that big cat story, it is indicative of how much of a threat this is. And, you know, I don't think any of us are under the illusion that these European powers or the US care about Ukraine per se. It's far more than that. It's about the power play between Europe, NATO and Russia, and of course that involves the US and all the European nations and all of us, and the idea that there are territorial concessions to be made seems to be unattractive to both sides on this, and so if that's the case, I think the bottom line might be, despite all of this display, the war will grind on, and that, I think, is the scary but very real possibility. That,
and intensify as well, especially with drone attacks.
That's right, and even this evening we've seen, you know, this ballistic missile hurtling towards Ukraine from the Russians, even as we're speaking, and we have just the continuation of the war as it has been. It has been heating up and at various points in recent weeks. I don't think that we can even separate out what is going on in the battlefield from what's going on in the White House, because part of the negotiation is in fact what's going on in real life and in real people's lives and in real bloodshed, and the cost is in blood as much as it is in rare metals or as gas or whatever it might be. This is, you know, a multi-dimensional game of chess, and as I think it said in the Mail, you know, it's with live grenades. Ultimately, what goes on in negotiations that is effective is the part that actually the likes of you and I don't get to know about, and it's the private conversations that take place in any negotiation, especially one like this, that will be key to trying to find a way out. And there will have to be concessions. You know, you don't make peace with enemies without concessions, and both sides will have to climb down to some degree, but also the art of peacemaking is allowing both sides to present what they've done as some form of victory, or at least not as total defeat. And I think that's going to be the very difficult task ahead for all of those in the US today discussing this.
And I think the Daily Mirror has the single word headline which sums it up as good as anything. The Ukraine Peace Summit stalemate. Trump's security offer to Zelensky is rejected by Russia. The Ukraine leader, I am ready for direct talks to end the conflict. And I think the Daily Mirror might have hit on the truth here, which is that basically Ukraine will be significantly smaller than it was in 2014, and Zelensky might find his way out of office as part of it in exchange, perhaps, for an Article 5 clause. In other words, Western nations and America will come to their aid without joining NATO. A sort of fudge, but with real security guarantees. That's probably how it's going to end. What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, I suppose that suggestion is NATO in all but name.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how attractive that will be to Putin any more than the idea of Ukraine being part of the European Union or part of NATO. I think these were among the red lines that he felt were crossed and are among the motivations for the horrific invasion and what he did. So again, I don't think there's necessarily an obvious way out of this. Stalemate, as they say in the Mirror, is a very good word for it, because the reason it's been dragging on so long, the reason Donald Trump couldn't fix this in 24 hours is because it may not be fixable in any way that is attractive to all of the many parties who have a say in it. And I think that, you know, there are various scenarios that one could try and imagine that could end the war, some far more likely than others, but they do involve, you know, territorial shifts. Whether Ukraine can somehow recapture all of Donetsk or make advances that just seem unlikely or impossible at the moment, or whether instead Putin gets to keep much of what he's taken over. These are just such, I mean, they're so difficult and impossible for us to predict in any respect. And at the same time, Trump is putting in so much legwork, so much effort into this. He's made it such a flagship and noticeable part of his foreign policy that he won't want to come out of this with nothing. And again, the fear with Trump in those situations is that for the need of having to show mission accomplished, he will sometimes go for a deal or a solution that really isn't a solution at all. So we just need to think back to Trump's first presidency, first term in office, and what happened with North Korea. And there was this big display of the two meeting, and there were the talks and what have you, but the threat didn't disappear after Trump effectively declared job done, mission accomplished. And I think the fear is the same here, but here the implications are right on our doorstep, right on Europe's doorstep, right on NATO's doorstep. Not that North Korea isn't a continuing and scary problem for the world either. So I think that's the fear with Trump, is that perhaps sometimes his absolutely well-meaning determination to show that he fixed everything, he got it done, and he did it with a big show and gave the people what they wanted, may somehow divert him into doing something which isn't long-term positioned for peace.
This is Jonathan Sacerdoti, commentator on the Middle East, on the royal family, and indeed on Ukraine and Russia. We'll have more discussion. We'll broaden the conversation to Gaza and to Israel right after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A warm welcome. This is Talk. My name is Jonny Gould. I'm in for Petrie, and she'll be back a little bit later on, I'm sure. A little bit of a sore throat. Just give me this opportunity to present the show, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here alongside Jonathan Sacerdoti. We've spent the first 25 minutes or so talking about the rolling news coming out of DC as Trump and Zelensky and all the other European leaders met to try and give him a heads up to give him a bit of support there, and indeed everyone was terribly well behaved. And Jonathan, let's have a look at a story that has been dominating our front pages in our media over the last 2 years, and we've been given respite over the last, I don't know, 12 hours or so because of what has been going on in DC, and that is in Gaza. And it's really impacted on our domestic stories as well, because I wanted to talk about Zara Sultana, and she has tweeted or posted or X'd, "The smears won't work this time. I say it loudly and proudly. Proudly, noch, proudly. I'm an anti-Zionist. Print that." And basically she has said that Jeremy Corbyn capitulated, in her words, over the definition of anti-Semitism, while leader of the Labour Party, said fellow MP Zara Sultana. Former Labour MPs Corbyn and Sultana launched their new political party. It's going to be called Your Party, probably be their party, I don't know how you vote, saying it would change politics and oppose government policy on Gaza. And I've been doing my podcast now for 6 or 7 years, and one of the first interviews I did was with basically a Muslim dissident, and he said to me, and it rung with me, and he said, "We know what communism thinks about Islam. We know what Islam thinks about communism." And what Sultana seems to be doing here is saying that Corbyn was a terribly popular chap, and we believe in all that populism, but basically he capitulated to Israel, to what she describes in her anti-Semitic tones as the lobby, and that she won't. So she's kind of taking over with a very, very Islamist view of the party. It is as extreme left as you could probably go.
Well, first off, on the name, Your Party, weren't they going to have a vote or something among all their members?
It's one woman, one vote, apparently.
And yeah, I think they avoided that because they knew it would be vote face if they if they did. But I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, the temptation is just to shrug off this new party because it seems to be all the loons and extremists that are too loony and too extreme for even the Labour Party. And I think the hope is that they will split the vote on the left. Of course, the problem with that is that there is a similar thought on the right, which is that Reform UK could split the vote on the right, and that could mean that we're in a really weird position if these two more populist parties, whether we can categorise them in a similar way or not is another conversation, take away some of the mainstream vote from, say, the Conservatives and from the Labour Party. It's really difficult to understand what's going to happen with the election result in the next election. And that is also interesting because we have a government which did win by a landslide, effectively, and yet is incredibly unpopular.
Because actually it didn't win a huge amount of votes.
Right.
Less than Corbyn.
Exactly. And so I think the point is that we're in a really strange situation in the UK, and one that is unpredictable, because it means that the votes could be split in multiple directions, and we're not really sure who will benefit from that. So if Voteface becomes a political power on the left, it will be unusual for it to do so, because I mean it is being led by the guy that drove the Labour Party into the gutter and then crashed it over and flipped it onto its roof, so to speak. And yet the idea that now, a little bit older and a little bit less in control of his faculties, he's going to now be the leader of the most up-and-coming new party. Well, that's what Zara Sultana's for. And I think that, anybody serious looking at this party, looking at these people, is not going to feel that this is a safe place for their votes or a safe party for the country. And yet, I can't just dismiss the sorts of things they're saying in terms of this sort of opinion and this sort of aggressiveness and this sort of revisionism about the anti-Semitism of the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. Let's not forget that it was the EHRC that actually said that there was this anti-Semitism built into the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn. And Jeremy Corbyn basically got kicked out of the Labour Party, more or less, because he sort of refused to accept that.
Yes.
And I think that given that that's the case, that is a body which is meant to be independent, was originally started by a Labour government, so certainly was not set to be biased against the Labour Party under Corbyn, it found that there was that anti-Semitism problem. And anti-Semitism in this context isn't really just an issue for us Jews, it's also an issue for all Brits, because it doesn't matter that it's Jews it's targeting. As you said, this marriage of extreme left and sort of Islamo-fascist Islamism in this one party now is extremely troubling for all British people.
It should be. And now Sultana's basically saying, I'm now emboldened enough to get rid of the extreme left.
Right.
That's basically what she said.
And that's what this party is about for her. So
Yes.
I think that these are all very, very ominous signs.
He
for this
definitely
country.
became deputy leader today.
Yeah.
And I look at these huge protests that go on, and the little one I saw in Eastbourne, and I see them rejecting out of hand the great Satan, the United States, or indeed Israel, or indeed even their own Labour Party, who I'm sure a lot of them voted for even at the last election, and certainly for Corbyn. And I think they're shutting themselves off not just of the world, but looking at some of the very, very good things that are happening in the societies that they reject, and imposing on the society in which they live a form of destruction. In other words, all they're doing is damaging their own plot, their own place, and not looking at the wonderful societies that they oppose. It does huge damage to Britain, huge damage, I think.
I think that Britain's in a very confused place at the moment for various reasons, and one of them is that politically there seem to be so many landmines that politicians are afraid of stepping on, or on the other side of it, that they're very keen to lay for each other. And given that that's the case, I think it makes it very difficult for ordinary people, ordinary Britons, the rest of us who aren't politicians, to know where we can put our faith, where we can vote for what we care about. And I think that most people actually aren't particularly motivated, or at least not primarily motivated, by all of these issues that we're seeing becoming such contentious and controversial and divisive and explosive issues. I think most British people actually aren't that motivated by things like Israel and Gaza.
No.
Whether they have opinions on it or sympathies one way or the other, it is sort of irrelevant to their day-to-day lives. And I think the forcing of those issues into politics so obsessively is really a problem. I mean, some will say, well, I'm one to talk because it's most of what I write about, but that's because that's my speciality, that's my specialism in journalism. It's what I cover and have a relatively good knowledge of. So that's why I write about it, but I'm not trying to position myself as somebody to run the country. I think that when we have even our current government obsessively preaching to Israel on what it should do, offering statehood to the Palestinians, none of these things really have a great deal to do with Great Britain. We're not really a superpower that can actually affect a change in the region. And I think the proof of that was that when Keir Starmer and David Lammy did say they would give the Palestinians recognition of a future state as a sort of punishment to Israel for what Israel was doing at the moment, they demonstrated that actually they not only don't have the power they think, but when they do have some power, it's used in the opposite direction, because their recognition of a Palestinian state was conditional on there being a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in this current war. And of course, what that did was motivate Hamas not to create any kind of ceasefire, which is the opposite effect of what most people in the Labour Party said they wanted. It pushed the war deeper into, into this ongoing escalation. And it really made it very unlikely that the hostages would be released. It made it unlikely that the people living in Gaza would have any rest or peace, even temporarily. So I think that what they showed was that Britain really, even when it does try and get involved in these things, actually messes up, does the opposite of what people should be trying to do.
Yes, they might
have be better keeping out of it.
That's right. They might have exacted a little bit more influence and power if they'd gone along with the reality of the war as opposed to a virtual, incorrect version as they read it. 03444991000. Jonathan Satcherdot is with us in the studio, and we'll talk after the break about the potential parties that will make up the general election result, because one thing we might be able to predict 4 years or so before the next election is that the result and the parties involved with maybe even double-digit votes might play a big part in our future in Britain, and certainly in Parliament. Stay tuned to Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a warm welcome. This is Talk. My name is Johnny. I'm in for Petrie tonight and today. And here is Jonathan Satcherdot, and we're talking about the parties that will make up the general election. And there's one thing that I would like to predict, even though we're 4 years away, and that we talked about the right and the left having their votes split between a plethora of parties. And it might be that Reform win the popular vote, but it's the Conservatives who will win more seats. And so we will have a battle royale between, I don't know, a confidence and supply contract between who should be the PM and the Deputy PM and the Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor, between Robert Jenrick, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, and, I don't know, a bit of Rupert Lowe in there. And, should we put Kemi Badenoch in there as well? Who knows what might happen, but it does look like that will happen. The Tories will win the majority of the seats, but the Reform will win, I don't know, 20 seats, because this electoral system is not built for them, and that they'll find some way of putting the Tories back in number 10.
Sounds like the afternoon schedule on that other channel. But well, I mean, I can imagine that one of the ways that Reform could be an important power is through some sort of coalition or other.
Because they're not going to win outright, are they?
Right.
You think that too, right?
I do think that, but then again, I think that there are many things that could happen between now and an election which could change how the result will look. I mean, if you just imagine that something large and catastrophic could happen to the Tories, and many Tory MPs could decide to defect. I think there is a universe in which I can imagine Reform UK becoming more like a version 2.0 of the Conservative Party, and therefore giving people the confidence to vote for it. But I think it's unlikely.
They say completely different things.
Yes.
They're a different kind of right wing.
That's correct.
Aren't they?
And I think that that's one of the reasons why it doesn't have that sense of being something I think mainstream right-wing voters might feel they can vote for. On the other hand, it does tackle a lot of issues and a lot of problems that many regular people are thinking about and worried about in a way that makes them feel they're being listened to. So I don't want to dismiss it at all. I'm just saying that I think we are so used in this country to these kind of brand name political parties,
Yes.
that third parties have always struggled, never mind fourth and fifth and sixth parties, as we're seeing emerging
Yes.
now. And so that's why I think that the way those parties may emerge as more powerful forces is through some form of kind of merging or transforming
Yes.
from other parties. But I think, you know, all of this stuff is virtually impossible for us to predict. I think what you just outlined is far more likely kind of idea. It might work very well, actually, because I think the institutional knowledge of how to govern is quite important, but also the kind of startup nature of newer parties is very promising and refreshing to people who think the old system is broken. So I think a combination of the two, and the more forward-thinking members of the older parties combined with the more rational and politically sensible members of the new parties, might present something which could be successful. But there's a lot of unknowns in that, and I think that when it comes to governing, unknowns are very scary and they create instability, and markets can be alarmed and shocked by that sort of thing. And so there can be all sorts of unpredictable results, like, you know, 50-day prime ministers and things. It sounds like a TV show, but it was 49 days actually, wasn't it? Something like that. But so I think that really that's one of the reasons I think many of us are quite afraid of what will happen in the next election. Not because we're worried that this party or that party will win, but actually we're worried that they won't, that nobody will be decisively able to form what is a functioning and reasonable government, and then we could really be in trouble.
Well, we had that, didn't we, with Nick Clegg astonishingly becoming Deputy Prime Minister, which I thought was a measurement of the last day of his political career, in fact, even though he'd reached high office, so to speak. It was kind of at the expense of kind of the Lib Dems and why they lost, and they've made a stunning comeback with a guy who dances on TikTok. So now, where are the votes going to? I read a while ago that your party, or the Corbyn Sultana party, could get as much as 10% of the popular vote, and that would be taken from very disaffected hard left Labour voters who loved Corbyn. They would be taken from presumably the Lib Dem, and indeed the Green Party, which is a similar sort of hard left scenario, not an Islamist version, but a hard left, I suppose, white party, if you like. But it also might come from some Reform voters as well. They'll take from right across the spectrum, not the Tories, but they might take from the Reform team.
And I think you hinted at it there, but also they'll take from the so-called Muslim vote, which, you know, was a campaigning power in the last election. And I think that that is a vote which, whilst being a minority vote, is a more and more powerful one. We've seen that because we now have these independent MPs who all were elected on that basis. And I think now that it's coalescing into this kind of party, which, heaven forbid, should become an actual Islamist party, the idea that in this country, in this age, we would struggle to have a successful Christian political party, but apparently if we can create a political Islamic party, it can start to have traction. I think that's definitely a shift that many people are worried about when they hear about that happening, and not hear about it happening, see it happening. Many people who live in some parts of the country actually have been warning about these sorts of shifts for some time, and now to see it manifest in this way, I think is alarming. And I think that also all of those surprising coalitions between different forces politically are also scary. So the idea of the far left and Islamists joining forces, the idea of when you see LGBTQ plus groups who are supporting terrorist Islamist groups elsewhere in the world, these things are so strange if you think about them, because what they really have in common is not a shared set of values and ideas, but actually it's a shared enemy in other people's values and ideas. They may want to destroy the same status quo, but when it comes down to it, they're very unlikely to get along in government or in a way that's actually going to be productive for the country or for either of them. And again, I think that's a sense of instability that will be bad for everybody were it to actually have much power.
This is the home of common sense. That is Jonathan Sacerdote. I am Jonny Gould, and we'll talk more after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A warm welcome to you. My name is Jonny Gould. I'm here for Petrie. And, you know, there have been a lot of stories about famine. There is a famine, there isn't a famine in Gaza. And the BBC has been involved in another controversy on that, reported by them about a girl called Marah Abu Zuhri and how it differed from the Israeli military's claim. Apparently, Jonathan, the BBC had to take action after receiving a real slating, a real criticism of their initial report about Marah Abu Zuhri's death. Tell us more about this very, very troubling story, because this is a trust issue with the BBC.
That's right. The BBC's admitted that a woman in Gaza that it claimed had died of malnutrition was actually being treated for cancer. And this is important because it's not just the BBC. We've seen it also on the front page of the Express and the New York Times, that there have been these horrifying and horrible images of people who obviously are very skinny, very thin, dangerously close to death. And it has all been presented as part of a coordinated policy of Israel to starve Gazan people, especially children, to death, which of course is a lie and isn't true. There is naturally food shortage for some in the Gaza Strip because there's a very tough and ongoing war there, and also because it is still to some extent governed by Hamas, a terrorist organization which ruthlessly sacrifices its own people, making sure that some of them are in hunger so that they will get exactly these kinds of images. But if you look at the Hamas fighters themselves, they are well fed, they are in fairly good condition, and you can also see on TikTok and online plenty of other people in the Gaza Strip who are able to go about their ordinary lives, even eating in restaurants and cafes. So on this story in particular, the BBC had presented this woman who actually was being treated for cancer as the victim of starvation, And they've had to admit that that isn't the case, and it's not the first time this has happened. Too many times these images that we've seen that have gone around the whole world have then been researched by other people and been shown through medical records or actual just reading of Arabic media, which has been more straight up about it, as having other problems. That doesn't mean that their situation is nice. These are people who are suffering, and their suffering may have been worsened by the fact that they're living in a war zone. But if this is the only proof of a supposed policy of starvation by Israel, if these photos are, so to speak, the best they can do to prove that, it rather makes you wonder if that policy isn't real. And yet those channels, the BBC and these other outlets, are not admitting that. They are not explaining that that's not the case. They're desperately looking for these photos and leaning on the same photos, the same photographers, even the same images of similar children or the same children, cropping out well-fed siblings from the same image, or hiding the truth about why that person looks that way. And this is all part of a coordinated attempt carried out within Gaza by Hamas, which deliberately puts forward these children or these adults who have dreadful illnesses and presents them to a credulous media to present as an evidence of starvation, when it is nothing of the sort. And those outlets, like the BBC in particular, massively resourced with a massive reputation around the world and a lot of power as a result of that, they really ought to be honest about this. They ought to be doing their own research. Whoever is responsible for this at the BBC ought to be named and shamed and fired. There should be an investigation within the BBC, but actually, let's have enough of the BBC marking its own homework. Somebody external should be investigating this and all the other failings of the BBC on the issue of the war in Israel, because it has been decidedly dishonest and deceptive in too many instances that it's then had to admit. It's time that they tried to find out why exactly and who exactly is behind this.
Can I give a bit of insight into this? When I moved from radio into television in the late 80s, I was alarmed at how a story was developed. In radio, you started with a clean sheet or a clean screen, and you started typing away, right? And, you know, there was critical thinking to the way that you wrote a story in radio, and radio was like that. And then television, right, apparently, right, when you get into television, you had to search for pictures, and the pictures is what you built the story around. And herein lies the nugget of why this Gaza war is going in the way. Find me a picture of a starving child. Yeah, let's write the story around that. So this is what's happening, because Hamas and UNRWA and various other sort of stakeholders in Gaza are coming up with these stories. You never see a Hamas fighter on screen, unless, of course, they're handing over a hostage, which is obviously not happening anymore.
And of course, that's the moment when
this is the problem with television. Actually, the television news shouldn't come from the pictures. Perhaps it might be excusable for someone to do a piece to camera, you know, a Jeremy Bowen or his replacement, to critically think about a situation rather than present us with a picture which they write the story around.
But you know what's doubly annoying about this, and you're quite right about that, and also there's the other tendency, I think, in modern news where we try to tell human stories or human interest stories, which are
anecdotal,
important, right? They are important within wars, because they humanise the results of war. So I'm not trying to say we shouldn't cover them, but they aren't really the story of
not
the war.
Story of the war.
And I think they don't talk about strategy, and they don't talk about what's actually happening and the long-term visions. War is horrific. Yeah. So that's a given, and it doesn't mean we should not look at it. I must reiterate that. But what they will then say is, well, we can't get our journalists into Gaza. This is the constant refrain of the BBC. Israel, they say, won't let them send their journalists into Gaza to corroborate these images, so it's not surprising that we presented a woman with cancer as a starvation victim. But it is surprising, and that's a pathetic response, because what it's saying is, we're punishing you. We're not going to bother doing our job properly, because the best route for us to corroborate it would be there on the ground. But as that's not open to us, we're not going to try any of the other options. And wonderful and impressive researchers like David Collier, an independent freelancer who works on his own, has revealed so many of these. And this is a man using mostly open source things that you can find yourself. He works on his own, and he finds exactly what's wrong with these children or people in these images and then presents it. Now, if he can do it, I mean, I have some advice for the BBC if they would take some from me. Hire David Collier.
David Collier.
I mean, they could,
well, they've just put his face, they've just projected his face onto the outside of BBC Broadcasting.
If one man knows
as a
how to
tribute.
do this, you know, one man
Yeah.
knows how to do this.
Yes.
If he's not the only man who knows how to do it, by the way, he's very impressive. But go and hire him. I'm sure he would be delighted to help
Yeah.
the BBC
Do you think so?
get rid of their problem with Jews and with Israel. But they don't want to get rid of that problem. That's what's become alarmingly
They've
clear.
disappeared down an editorial rabbit hole. I've got one other solution. I was thinking about writing a paper on this. Instead of having a foreign correspondent or a special correspondent related to a story, perhaps all wars should be covered. And this goes back to your idea of anecdotal stories, the All-Agarian way of covering war, to having a defence and security correspondent covering a war, because that way it comes from a military position. And then you get someone talking about theatre, you're talking about someone who's talking about who's advancing and who's losing and who's winning. So if it's related to defence and security, for example, there's Deborah Haynes at Sky News, who I find very credible indeed, because she talks about the military in a war and gives you a real snapshot of what's going on about the war. Perhaps it's a defence and security correspondent or a plethora of those people that should be covering foreign affairs.
And I think it's an honesty issue as well. Whether or not we reframe who is covering the war, there is just a problem of honesty and integrity. And when a channel or individuals within a channel or an outlet or a newspaper aren't trying to interrogate the ideas that they hold, and that they're starting with an image or an idea or a thought or an opinion of their own and trying to illustrate it, whereas a responsible version of that would be to have their own thoughts and ideas and analysis and try to challenge it. If you try to challenge and find the holes in your own ideas first, you're far more likely to reach something approaching the truth than if you just simply perpetuate the same lies and problems and propaganda, and then when other people prove that you've done so, you try and shrug it off by saying, as is normal practice, we've put an extra line at the bottom saying that the entire story we wrote about starvation was actually about a woman with cancer. That's not an honest way of dealing with the problem.
No, that's right. And we have had a problem. Where can we find much of your writing these days? The Spectator, and of course you have a Substack and you have a YouTube feed as well.
That's right. The easiest place to find everything I do is on my website, jonathansacerdote.com, and good luck spelling that. And then you can find links to all the different socials.
Thank you very much indeed to Jonathan Sacerdote. This is Talk. My name is Jonny Gould. And coming up in the next hour of the show, do you think society is coming apart? I'm just doing this from my own anecdotal point of view. It's just a story, which is that I came out of the station, came across a small but very noisy Palestinian protest. So did thousands and thousands of other people funneling through the station. It was so busy that there was a queue to get out of the station, and everyone was leaving Eastbourne to go to the seafront to see a beautiful airborne display, an aerial show. Do you think twice before saying what you think? Have you lost lifelong friends over politics? I'd love to hear your stories. 0344 499 1000 as we continue the show into Wednesday morning right here on Talk. My name's Jonny Gould. It's been an absolute pleasure so far to see you on the show, and I hope that we'll talk to you on 0344 499 1000 right after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And let me be the first to welcome you to Wednesday morning. Hello, I'm Jonny Gould. Is it Tuesday? I don't know what I'm doing, do I? Tuesday. It's like being in the casino. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. It's just after midnight. Dave tells me it's Tuesday morning. So all I was doing was just predicting the future. One day it will be Wednesday. 03444991000. If you have personal experiences, we always look for you on the show. Petrie always asks, and I'm going to ask the same thing. Have you had any personal experience about losing lifelong friends over politics? Friendships that you've had for many years where you thought you had common cause, where you had kids in common, where you had, husbands or wives, not in common if you know what I mean, but sort of interests in social groups, and then suddenly the ugly head of politics has reared and ruined your lot with them. Do you think twice before saying what you think? And as a consequence of this, do you think society is coming apart? I'd really love to hear your experiences about this. 0344 499 1000. Have you lost lifelong friends over politics? Many calls are expected on this, and I think a lot of people have lifelong friends, older people who never talked about politics. Politics just wasn't a part of their daytime discourse, but it seems to be much more prevalent these days. People are becoming a bit more tribal about their views. There's more schisms out there. There's more for us to argue about. 0344 499 1000, 87222 on the texts, and of course you can X us, to Twitter us at talkTV and at Jonny Gould. And let's go and have a chat with Georgina in London. Hello, Georgina. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jonny Gould. It's lovely to talk to you.
It's lovely to speak to you too, Georgina. Thank you.
Well, I'm of the mindset that a friendship that can be broken never began in the first place. And I do think, regardless of your political view, unless you are in politics as a job, I think we should be able to sit down, maturely talk about our political views like adults and not get too heated about it. Leave the politics to those who are paid to do the job and hopefully do the job well, unlike the present government, might I say.
Indeed. Well, we're not going to fall out of that, about that at all, Georgina. But the thing about it is that some politics, even though it is the job of Westminster or your local MP or your council councillor, does impact us. So,
it does impact us.
And
yes,
so that's actually where the politics comes into it, doesn't it?
Well, I've been a staunch Conservative, was a staunch Conservative for over 40 years, which is a long time. And my best friend was as left could be. I mean, she no, seriously, she was like a Jeremy Corbyn girl back in the day. So, I mean, they are polar opposites. But what you've got to think of, if you are friends, then you are friends, and politics has to stay outside of your front door. Now, if I was in Westminster, for instance, I would possibly have a totally different view and only be in circles where the politics were the same. But as I am not, then I have the luxury, let's say, to be able to choose my friends. And my best friend, she's a reform girl now, as am I. So for the first time in our lives, we're on the same side of the fence, which is wonderful.
So your friend was hard left and now she's reform?
Absolutely, yes.
That is interesting.
Well, she will never vote Labour again.
No.
Never vote Labour again. I think the way that this country has gone is totally alien to both right and left.
Yeah.
There's no grey matter here. You are either right or left. And I'm not talking all this silly far right or far left. That's for children. There is a right way and there is a wrong way. And I think that, the ones who want the best for the country and the best for the people in the country, and the children, because remember, Johnny, the children are our future, and we have got to get this country back into a state that is going to be good for our children to grow up in and our grandchildren. We can't let things deteriorate any further than they already are.
And the more you go around the country, the more it seems that there are different pressures and issues around them. So the minute that I leave London, you live in London as well.
Yes.
It's like going to another country. There's a different demography. My little child said to me on a little holiday that we had on the south coast in Sussex, and she's just completely apolitical. She's a child. She said, "Daddy, all the people here have got blonde hair." And what she was trying to say was, people, the majority of people are white. That's what she was trying to say. She was just looking at hair colour, because obviously when she walks down the street in London, it's made up of many, you know, colours and creeds, and a lot of people have got black hair or dark hair. That's all she was saying.
Well, you see your little girl, that's heartbreaking for me, because, you know, this is the innocence of a child, and a child says without filter. And I think that's wonderful. When there was a time, Johnny, when we could all do that, because that was freedom of speech.
Yes.
And these are the luxuries, and they are luxuries, Johnny, because not everybody in the world has these luxuries. But we don't live in North Korea, we don't live in China. And our forefathers and the veterans of this country, who a lot of them now sleep on the streets, whilst we're housing migrants, that they were the ones who have fought for our liberties, the liberties that we have all taken for granted for so long. Yes. And it's only now, Johnny, that the liberties that we have are being taken away piece by piece, that we are sitting back and thinking, oh my goodness, this is a problem, because we have been so used to having these and taken them for granted that you know, they've become second nature to us. And it's only now that you go out and you're having to worry about pronouns and what you say and being offensive. And it's just it's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous, to a point now where people are afraid to say what they're thinking. Now, sadly for me, I have a form of Tourette's where I don't have a filter.
Right.
And if I'm thinking it...
Is it really Tourette's, or is it just you?
I think it's just me, darling,
yes,
to be honest.
It's not really Tourette's, is it?
I don't think that I should have to think before I speak.
No.
Because I've had, you know, relatives of mine who fought in wars. Yes. And I had a relative of mine who died for the privilege of us having the luxuries of freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and to have the democratic values and luxuries that we should have in this country. And they're all being taken away now.
Yes. Do you think J.D. Vance was right to say what he said, that there is an issue in Britain with free speech, with our freedoms?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I say this is what we need within our government. We need somebody with the testicular fortitude to be able to say straight out, this is how it is, this is wrong. The freedom of speech that we once had in Britain, and we're very proud to have, we no longer have, because it is being taken away, you know, by the back door, through these little sort of laws that are coming out now. And it's totally wrong, because this is not what we voted for. And what these politicians who are in government now need to realise is that they are public servants. They work on our behalf, and we pay their wages. So if they're not working for us, then they are not doing their job. Ergo, they are superfluous to our requirement, and they need to go.
Georgina, what do you hope for as you continue to live your life in terms of changes? Are we too far gone from the society that you hoped for? What kind of changes need to be made, and, you know, can we be saved?
Right, we need to start having referendums before laws are passed. We need to have a total rethink on the judiciary, because the judiciary is working for itself. It's not working on behalf of the law. The law is blind. It should be blind.
Yes, it should be blind.
And it isn't. It isn't. You know, and things are going drastically wrong now.
So you think there's legal activism that's going on? I think that's the term for it.
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, legal activism. And that should not be the case within... I mean, the whole of the world has copied our judiciary because we were the ones who stated that in the first instance. And now, for some reason, it's gone haywire. Things are not working as they used to be, and this needs addressing very, very quickly. And, you know, there needs to be a governing body on the judicial system in this country because there is a problem.
Georgina, thank you very much indeed. 03444991000, referendum on all the key issues, and a reform of our judiciary to outlaw legal activism. 03444991000. Have you fallen out with a lifelong friend over politics? Someone you believed you had common cause in, but you just don't have anymore? I have a long-term friend, and I don't agree with him on almost anything. And he had the audacity once to walk out of a discussion that we had, because basically he didn't like my story, which was true. He just didn't like it. And he thought, because basically his orthodoxy is liberal and he's, I suppose, to the left, and he stormed out. And I thought it was pretty disgraceful that he should do that. And he did it in front of our friends. And I hung him out to dry. I wouldn't speak to him for 3 or 4 days, and we met after that and we made up. And we are still friends, okay? We are still friends, even though basically I don't really agree with him on kind of a number of issues, and I'll never really forgive him for what he did that day. But the reason I'm still friends with him, basically, is because he's an intelligent guy, he's a good guy, he's a force for good in his way. He's a good dad, he's a good husband, he's a good father, and I try to remember those things, okay? Those things about him are very good. He's not a criminal, he's not a bad man. I just don't agree with him on fundamentals. And so I try and remember all the good things that he is, and that's the way that I deal with it. And I wonder if you've got a story a bit like that. 0344 499 1000 as we go to Pigeon, Michigan. And we speak once again to our friend here on Talk. It's Cindy. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, Johnny. It's been a while. Where have you been?
Been a while. Cindy, I've been away. I've not been away in that way. I've been on the substitutes bench waiting for the call, but here I am, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
I've been waiting too. And what's this? I hear you have a podcast.
Oh, I do. Well, thank you for that.
What's it called?
It's called it's called Jonny Gould's Jewish State, and you'll find it on an Apple and Spotify
YouTube?
And all the other places. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll look for you on YouTube.
I hope
I'm always on YouTube.
You enjoy it. Now, Cindy, you have lost friends over politics, haven't you?
I have.
Very sad.
I've lost, of 28 years, mind you.
Really?
And they cut me off in public over Facebook because they saw pictures of me with Donald Trump gear on.
Right.
And
your MAGA hat.
Yeah, my my MAGA sweatshirt.
Right.
And the hat would mess up my hair, but yeah. So they told me off in a few long paragraphs. A bunch of "you've changed." Donald Trump is this, that, and the other, and all lies. They were believing in the Project 2025 propaganda. Okay. And I wasn't even allowed the decency to have a conversation with them. And I feel that politics just have gotten too polarized because there's a lot of things I believe that bring us together in the world. It's not just politics.
So, like I said, Cindy, the person you fell out with, okay, they didn't like your MAGA sweatshirt or whatever. But like with my friend, I don't know if you were hearing that just before I came to you, but yeah. So I have this friend, and I don't really agree with him on anything, but he's not a bad guy, okay? He's just a bit pompous, all right? He's a bit of an idiot. It's not my choice of. He's not my choice of. He's not my choice of small talk. But he's a good dad, and he's a good husband, and he pays his taxes. So that's the way I kind of deal with him. And he's and we're always pleased to see each other. But I'm not going to talk to him about it. And can you make it up with your Facebook friends?
You know, I'm blocked on the telephone. They immediately, yeah. I've tried sending messages over Facebook because I'm not blocked there by one of them, and nothing. I get no response, and I don't understand because this is it's very hurtful. You know, 28 years of a friendship, it's a very long time.
Yeah, shame.
And there's a lot of memories. I've let them live with me during their hardships. I've fed them.
Really? Oh, that's sad. That's sad. That is sad.
I mean, it goes 20 years. It's gone very, very deep.
Yeah.
But, you know, some people, they just figure that they hate the person that you voted for so much that they take it, they've taken it too personally. Yeah. They think that, I guess, me and Donald Trump are one, and which I don't agree. I don't agree, 100%. With the man, but I back him on a lot of things. Yes, I do. And if I were in England, I would vote reform UK all the way. I do have one slight problem with the men and women's prisons. That's a sticker for me. I don't like that. So
well, you're talking about trans people in women's prisons.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, but
a lot of people don't like
Nigel
that.
Can still fix that. He can still fix it. He can come back from that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would vote reform all the way. But yeah, I think that people need to judge people for who they are with you, how they are with you, how they treat you, how they've been having treated you. Lots, the love that you have. Why must it be, oh, you voted for that person, I hate you now, or you're just, I don't understand. I don't quite get that.
I think I might have an answer for you, Cindy. I think I might have an answer here for you, which is that they've fallen out with you because of a visual of you on Facebook. So they have seen a two-dimensional version of you without remembering the kindness that you wrought to them, the housing of them, the feeding of them. And I think the more that you look at social media, the more you sort of itemize what you think of someone, it hollows out your humanity. And I would say to those people, and indeed to everyone who uses social media, to get out more, because it creates grievance, it creates anger, and then you get out in the street and you're in the local shop and people are normal and you can have a chit chat and a nice discussion. And I think that actually the reason they fell out with you is because they stopped thinking of you as a person and thought about you as a commodity on a picture.
I think that you're right, because it's been 15 years since I've been back home where I'm from, which is San Diego, California. Oh. And that's where these people still are.
Well, you're 1,500 miles away, aren't you? You're a long way, right?
I'm a long way, yes. I'm a long ways. Which I'm returning in November, but I'm not going to be seeing. I don't think I'm going to be seeing them. I've learned now I'm too old to. If that's how a person's going, if that's how they're going to.
Cindy, sometimes closing a book, is the right thing, and you advance and move on. Sometimes things happen in life. One gets married, you have a new family to take on board, you have children, you have grandchildren. Things happen in life, and sometimes priorities change. And though it would be nice to hold on to these friendships, if it's not possible, you've kind of got to move on and look after your own sanity, I think, perhaps, Cindy. So maybe that's the way to look at it.
I think you're right.
Cindy, listen.
You're so good. You're so good.
Oh, that's so lovely. Thank you, Cindy. And listen, it's always lovely to speak to you. Normally, I get to speak to you on early breakfast, or at least I did in the past. Hope we speak to each other again very soon.
I hope so too.
Look after yourself, Cindy. Cindy in Pigeon in Michigan. It's Talk. We have callers from all over the world, and in just a moment, we'll hear from Sarah in Liverpool, who's also fallen out with old friends. And maybe you've fallen out with relatives about politics, about jealousies, about other things. Tell us more. 0344 499 1000. I'm Jonny Gould, and I'll speak to you in a bit.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a warm welcome to the show. I'm Jonny Gould. I'm standing in for one night only for Petrie, who'll be back again tomorrow, I should say tonight, from 10 o'clock right here on Talk. Should we have a quick spin through the papers before we talk to Sarah in Liverpool? We're going to start with The Times, where Trump offers a very good Kiev security guarantee. We will be involved, says Donald Trump on the front of The Times. After Zelensky hails a positive meeting at the White House, certainly the talk from all the world leaders has been a positive one. That's the front of The Times. Rail journeys disrupted as dry weather affects the tracks as well. Rail services have been cut and speed restrictions imposed on trains due to the persistently dry weather. Stalemate, says The Mirror. Trump's security offer to Zelensky is rejected by Russia, apparently, according to The Mirror. Ukraine leader, I'm ready for direct talks to end the conflict, but of course in that will be concessions on territory. In other words, might is right. And all those thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who've been lost defending their country, let's hope it's not such a bitter pill to swallow, that it's not such a painful, I don't know, regression of territory in the name of Russia's aggression. And by the way, Trump blames Biden, not Putin, for the war, which is, I think, low-hanging fruit. Lots of lovely pictures as well of the meeting. It was much more cordial between Zelensky and Trump than it was last time, when Trump bundled him out, basically, and said, you're gambling with World War III and all this kind of stuff. Zelensky, we're ready for talks with Trump and Putin. He signals his willingness for trilateral peace meeting as he returns to the Oval Office to reset a disastrous showdown. And Trump says he'll back security guarantees. Zelensky wears a suit jacket and jokes with a reporter who criticised his last outfit, and hands over a letter from his wife to Melania Trump as well. And the FT, Trump floats the prospect of a US security guarantee in a bid to end the Ukrainian war. 0344 499 1000. Quentin Letts writes an opinion piece on the front of the Daily Mail. It was eclectic. It was electric, it had jeopardy, it was a chess match without the live grenades. The Zelensky, well, he survived this one, says Quentin Letts. The Ukrainian president's Oval Office rematch passed without diplomatic incident. The trapdoor under his seat was not activated, and he was not served any poisonous tea. 0344 499 1000. Looking for your personal stories about schisms in society, about how you may have fallen out with friends and how actually you may have tried to keep it together. Let's go to Liverpool now and talk to Sarah. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Johnny.
How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. How's yourself?
Yeah, not bad. I'm enjoying the show very much.
Glad to hear it.
Tell me.
Well, as anyone who knows anything about this fair city of mine, politics, like comedy and sport, is in the blood.
Yes.
They go together like tea and biscuits. And to be perfectly honest, if people in Liverpool weren't rowing, well, anyone else in the country say it would be a row. Everyone else in Liverpool says, "Oh, we're just talking, just a discussion."
Right.
You know, please.
It's good. It's progressive to get things out, however heated they are, because at least you know where you stand with your friends, and then hopefully you're still friends afterwards.
Well, if you didn't talk, everyone falls out. You don't agree, you don't, whatever. Everyone does that all the time. We all have big people go, "That's a terrible row you're having." Oh, especially if from other parts of the country, not from around where I live. And many of the time, I've had some beautiful rows actually with people, and I haven't. We've calmed down and forgotten. And remember, we go. Just you remember who's good. I'll tell you, you'll find out who's right and who's wrong. 9 times out of 10, I'm right.
And so, do you ever apologise, or just everything calm down and you don't mention it again?
Well, it calms down. I mean, I've had some, especially with everything that's been going on over the last few years, with the rise of the far right and with Putin is meddling, and of course Ukraine. Many's the time I've had to, shall we say, get a bit Jesuitical with people. I mean, you can go for the full Bob Geldof and have a good row. It depends who's talking.
I've got to say, I've been in radio and television for 35 years, but I've never heard anyone use the term Jesuitical. And I congratulate you for that. Tell me what you mean.
Well, what it means is, you listen to somebody, you may have one opinion, they may have another, and you say, and if you hold the opposite opinion, well, let's get this out there, let's see. In touch of the Pope Francis's, you know what I mean?
Right, okay. Well, he is a Jesuit, isn't he? Is he?
He was, yeah, he was a Jesuit.
Yeah.
And especially with what's been going on in the last few years,
yeah.
I've been exasperated more than anything with people, especially anyone who believes anything that's been on Russia Today and comes straight out of Putin and his apologists' mouths. And even though they're seeing the evidence on screen, doesn't matter if it's on Channel 4, BBC, Sky, whoever, CNN, when they saw the tanks rolling through Ukraine, oh no, that's lies. And you go, no, that's not lies. Every single channel is showing it. Why aren't you seeing it? Well, it was Zelensky who invaded Russia, and you go, no, he didn't. It was Putin went to Ukraine. Yes. Well, and you end, and you just, and he says, well, it was because, but it was a puppet government put in there. No, Putin wants to put a puppet government into Ukraine. He feels like everyone's against him. No, that's his KGB paranoia talking. And, and getting through to them, and then you do it very calmly, because if you start screaming at people, you just go, no, you end up having a coronary, and you're not going to do anyone any good. It's no good having a row if you're in intensive care, rule 1. And you can't put anyone straight. So, over time, some people you need to knock sense into them, and others you need, it's more like, water on limestone, get through to them that way. And
so, let me ask you, Sarah, what is it about the Scouse mentality that was rather hit on in a comedic way by Harry Enfield in his characters, going, hey, calm down. What is it about the Scousers that sets you apart from the rest of the country when it comes to rowing and then making up?
Well, what it is, if you really want to know the truth, I put it down to the fact that apart from the fact that this place is like the UN anyway.
Right.
I'll be perfectly honest, we are practically the United Nations.
Right.
Truthfully, after the war, when they were choosing where they were going to put the UN building, it was a toss-up between here or New York.
Was it really Liverpool? Is that a joke?
Well, who's to know? Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
But the trouble was,
Liverpool would have been a great idea. I mean, Liverpool was one of the great cities of the world 150 years ago.
Well, actually, up until I'd say, in redundancy started coming in. That was when everything started to go down.
Right.
But there was too many bombs dropped during the war, and there was too many hills. So we said we want somewhere a bit more flat, really. It's too close. We need a bit more room to spread out. And the St Paul's Eye Hospital didn't want to go, and the Echo office was moving. So, so they said, terribly sorry, you'll have to go to New York.
Okay.
So that's that. But you see, the thing is, a lot of it's down to the fact, we are like the United Nations in this city has been for best part of a couple hundred years, really. Yeah. But the other thing is as well, you've got to bear in mind that a lot of people in the city, regardless their racial background, you can always find Celtic blood in them.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have you can have the rest of the world there, but there's always a drop of Celtic blood.
So what you're saying is the Celtic blood is a bit more fiery than the Anglo-Saxon blood of the rest of the country. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, especially as the fact that a lot of it is, you've got Scots, you've got 70% of Irish.
Right.
I am myself, and also Welsh. So you've got all that going on.
Right.
Bear in mind, the Celts are a very bolshy and passionate people,
yes.
And we do like a Barney, and what most people go, oh dear, especially if you anywhere else in the country, go, oh, how can anyone talk like this? Because I've seen a few people when they're seeing what I would consider small talk. Anyone else would be getting counselling, and you just go, no, this is normal. I mean, okay. I've had some beautiful rows with my family.
It sounds like it, Sarah. It sounds like it. But I want to ask you another question here, because I'm fascinated by the Protestant and Catholic makeup of Liverpool, and also this idea that families are split by supporting Liverpool and Everton in the same family, and all that goes on, and Protestants marry Catholics, and there's the docks as well, and all that history as well, which has fed down through the generations. And it's very similar to Glasgow in that way. There's plenty of Protestants and Catholics there, and yet in Glasgow you have that terrible sectarianism, right, where you have to be a Rangers fan if you're a Protestant and a Celtic fan if you're a Catholic, and there's some really bad stuff going on between those clubs. Why, with the same social history that Liverpool and Glasgow have, is it comparatively peaceful and bonhomie going on in Liverpool but not in Glasgow? That's always been a mystery to me. Why is it so different?
Well, there's a few reasons, really,
right.
Jonny. Firstly, I blame the rain. We have a lot of rain in Liverpool, and that wind blowing in.
Okay, so it sobers you up.
Everyone walks. That's why everyone in Liverpool has a bad lower back. We've all got terrible sciatica.
Right, because the rain sobers you up.
Well, it's not that. Mind you, then again, the same weather's in Glasgow, so we can rule that one slightly out.
Okay.
The other thing is, in Liverpool, we also had a hell of a lot of bombing during the war.
Right.
I don't think many people realise this,
right.
but outside of London, we got the most bombs.
Right.
And the bombing really didn't end until D-Day for us.
Right.
We got hammered in the Blitz from 1939 right the way through to the May Blitz in 40. Christmas Eve, Happy Christmas, Love Adolf, Wallop, we got a raid.
Right.
And it never stopped.
Right.
And
so it basically created, a flat Earth, which created a new consensus that was grown out of it.
Well, put it this way: if you're getting bombed and and there's half your house on top of you, or the air raid shelter or whatever, you're not going to give a monkey's who's going to dig you out.
No.
As long as someone gets you out.
No.
Also, but a lot of people were of course, everyone got called up in the forces, and you didn't care who was either side of you.
Right.
They were your mates.
Right.
Especially as one of the regiments, in Liverpool, that's actually got the freedom of the city, was the Irish Guards. And their motto is Qui separabi. Who separates us? No one. And a very ecumenical regiment.
This is so interesting, Sarah. This is how the consensus of this city has been created through many, many instances. Very interesting.
Not to mention all the hardship that we've had over the years. As depicted by Bleasdale in many of his television dramas and plays.
Sure.
And the same with Willie Russell. And hardship, poverty, and most people would say, oh yes, well, football, it's like Glasgow. It is hell. In Liverpool, 80% of people support Everton. 20% support Liverpool, and I know that because I know a lot of Evertonians, and they it doesn't matter what background they're from, they just go, we support Everton. Why?
Right.
They're always losing. We love the underdog. Believe you and me, if Everton was playing Wrexham, we'd be torn. We'd be going, can we have a draw, please? We don't want either of you to lose. There's jokes even going around. Evertonians tell jokes about Everton. It shows how self-deprecating we are. Some people take football, it's like politics, way too seriously.
I know. Well, of course, you lost again tonight, so sorry about that. The new season starts off in Evertonian fashion.
Oh, we're used to it. We're the Stoic philosophers.
Yeah. You've got a nice new stadium, though, and all the best there. Listen, Sarah, it's been lovely to talk to you, and I hope
Thanks very much, Jonny.
We speak again very soon. It's fascinating insight into Liverpool, and I've got a few answers as to why Liverpool and Glasgow are so different when it comes to social unity. Very, very interesting. 0344 499 1000. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back with Paul in Bolton. Stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, and a warm welcome. It's Johnny here in the chair for another 20 minutes or so right here on the home of common sense, and plenty of calls tonight. Really appreciate your comments, and we're looking for personal experiences of if you've fallen out with friends because of politics, people that you thought you had common cause with, but actually you suddenly talk about something and you say, well, I'm very disappointed in you, I can't believe that. Or as Cindy in Michigan said a couple of minutes ago, someone saw her wearing a MAGA sweatshirt on Facebook and blocked her, wouldn't take her phone calls anymore, and apparently they were really close to the point where Cindy housed them and fed these people. How very, very sad is that? And I think there's a problem here with social media because it commoditizes people into just pictures or short videos, and people forget the real human behind that, and I think that's a real tragedy of our time. 0344 499 1000. Would it be hard to be friends with someone with a different point of view? Paul from Bolton, welcome.
Hello, Johnny. Okay?
Hi, Paul. Yes, very good, thanks.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, I totally get the person who was annoyed with Cindy for wearing the MAGA T-shirt myself, because as someone who's LGBT+, if someone's wearing a MAGA T-shirt, the likelihood is that they're going to be LGBT+ phobic. You might get a few...
Do you think so?
Odds and sods who are in that grouping that are even a bit misguided.
But hang on, Paul, what about gay people who support Trump?
Well, there's a lot of gay people who I'd argue are transphobic, and they're just as bad to me.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because being gay and being trans are two different things as well, aren't they?
Yeah, but I just think anyone who's in any sort of group that's a bit repressed shouldn't be then supporting anything that represses another group of people. Right. To be honest, you've no qualification then to moan about yourself being repressed if you're going to repress other people. But I totally get, because like I said, I just feel like anyone supporting something like that is invalidating my existence. And also, but like I said, to your switchboard, I've not had a lot of trouble with this kind of thing myself, because I'll put things on Facebook, and Facebook friends largely tend not to care what I think. Luckily, my close family think similar, although strangely enough, when you're on the same side of politics, and obviously I'm not on the right-wing side, but you can still find that you disagree within your own camp. Do you know what I mean? You only have to look at the Labour Party, and obviously when these other parties get a bit bigger, like Reform, the Greens, you'll see bigger. Well, you're seeing it already a bit with the Greens leadership. There's a bit of a divide, but
there is.
I'm lucky, but as I said to your switchboard, I think if you know someone through a hobby that you like, or you work together, and then you find out politics, well, it's a little bit different. But I also said to your switchboard, there's no way I'd ever want to be friends with someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg or Nigel Farage or Anne Widdecombe, all them really extreme right-wingers. I'm not saying I'm so intolerant that I wouldn't...
I think it's a bit harsh to call them extreme right-wingers. I know what you're saying, because basically you're on the left and you look to them and you think that they are far right. But, you know, perhaps if you put your political compass towards the middle of some of the things you think, I think it's probably a bit unfair to say that they're far right.
Well, no, I'm not saying it because they're on the right, because I was about to say that with people like Ken Clarke and Michael Heseltine, I still vote for them, but I don't have the same issues with them. No. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not that intolerant that I dislike everyone who's centre to right. I mean, I'm fed up with some in Labour, but what I mean is I just find it hard, because I'm very socially liberal. And for someone to be very socially conservative, it's just very hard. And the same with me, economics. I hate poverty and all this, that, and the other. And I know some people follow different ideals and are hoping for the same result as me at the end of it. So I'm not that thick in that. I mean, you'd have to chat to people and see. But as I say, if I found out someone and they said, "Well, I'm homophobic," why would I want to just have that hanging around?
You don't want to mix with people who have prejudices, but equally there are people who are perfectly decent on the right who, you know, don't want to dismiss you or cancel you.
Well, there's two rights, isn't there? There's, as I said, there's the wet Tories who, if you're on the left and centre, you tend not to find them as offensive. Just as I'm sure there's some people on the right, although sometimes some on the what you call the proper right, that's a better way of putting it if you want me to put it that way, but on the proper right, sometimes they can, at the minute, a lot of them are saying they prefer Jeremy Corbyn to Keir Starmer, yet Keir Starmer's probably closer to them in political terms because he's more in the centre, but that's to do with radicalism a bit. They probably admire Jeremy Corbyn more, even though they're not a fan of his particular politics, whereas you see Keir Starmer as a bit in this wishy-washy camp.
Well, I think the issue with Keir Starmer today is we're not sure what he stands for. He keeps on U-turning. He comes up with these policies. The rebels on the backbenches have a pop at him, or the opposition has a go at him, or the media has a go at him, and he finds out that all his welfare reforms or grooming gangs inquiries or even perhaps his declaration of a Palestinian state might get thrown out.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think there's a lot of people, though, there was a lot of people on the right when Jeremy Corbyn was trying to be Prime Minister. They were down on Jeremy Corbyn and they were saying, we need someone more to the centre, we need another Blair-type figure, But then the minute they get that, then they're saying they want something like, then they're admiring Jeremy Corbyn. It's like they finally get someone to the centre, but then they're moaning about it when they get what they did. Because when there was a replacement competition with Jeremy Corbyn, I personally didn't want Keir Starmer. I wanted one of the two ladies, Rebecca Long-Bailey or Lisa Nandy.
Right.
But people were like, oh, we've got to, and it's partly because of people we don't get, like female leaders in the Labour Party, and that's outsiders from Labour as well as people within.
Although I think Long-Bailey was on a hiding to nothing when she stood after Corbyn, because she was seen as the continuity candidate for Corbyn, and of course they were never going to go down that road after the disaster of the 2019 election from a Labour point of view. So that was her done, and they looked for a compromise candidate, and that had to be Starmer, really, didn't it? There wasn't really anyone else around in the. I know he had rivals, but he was the outstanding candidate, wasn't he?
Well, Lisa Nandy would have been the happy medium between the two, but to be honest, all them people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn, a lot of them can't have voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey because they were still members of the party by then. But then they're the same people who are moaning about Keir Starmer being the leader. So it's like you won't put your faith in Rebecca, and it all goes full circle. I'm not sure it does as much with the Tories, but I think with Labour it goes full circle. So you go from right-wing Labour to Ed Miliband Labour to Jeremy Corbyn, and then it's back to some sort of right-wing Labour.
Yeah, it swings and roundabouts. It seems to be. Well, there is that, isn't there?
We'll see. It's not exposed as much in other parties, and like I said, with the Tory party, they loosely tend to get elected on the centre ground-ish, don't they? I think Boris was a bit of an extreme candidate, and Liz Truss in the way they were presenting themselves. But when Boris got in, there wasn't a lot of his, like Theresa May with Brexit, a lot of his time got took up with COVID, didn't it? So
indeed it did. It really was a problem for him. Paul, thank you very much indeed. That's Paul from Bolton on Talk. Okay, should we just have a peg back after the break? We'll talk about some of the headlines that have been made out of this. We'll hear from Zelensky and Trump on a momentous day here on Talk, and then we'll have a chat with Mandy in Cambridgeshire, here on the home of Common Sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, it's Johnny here in the chair for another few minutes, and of course the headlines have been made throughout the early evening into tonight about Trump floating the prospect of a US security guarantee in a bid to end the Ukraine war, that there will be a trilateral meeting between Trump, Putin and Zelensky, where Zelensky will talk about territory concessions in order to win the war. It sounds such a grievous and bitter pill for the Ukrainians to take, but it is a war which has gone on for 3 years and continues ferociously. So let's go to the Oval Office now and talk about those guarantees from President Trump, here with President Zelensky.
What guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And first time that President Trump mentioned the security guarantee for Ukraine, it was so informal. You just wonder whether he'd been caught off guard or that he was about to be misquoted. But then he kept on repeating it, and it became more and more clear that there would be security guarantees. So here is President Trump guaranteeing Ukraine some form of military security.
There'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
So Europe are there first. So that again is this idea that Trump is outsourcing the problems to Britain and to France and to Germany and to Holland because they are the first line of defence. But he said that they'll be involved. Perhaps that'll be with military hardware. I don't think it'll mean American boots on the ground, but it does look like a sort of virtual NATO. Which, NATO in name only, without the name, should we say, in kind of defending Ukraine, and indeed some of the other countries that border Russia as well. And, are we talking about a peace deal? Are we talking about a ceasefire? This is the comments of President Trump later on in the Oval Office.
Is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
Well, let's hope that there is some kind of meaningful peace and not a ceasefire, which is often the trigger for the next war. We are now going to hear now from Sir Keir Starmer, who gave his reaction after the meeting of the EU leaders with President Trump, and apparently during the meeting with all the EU partners, Trump got Putin on the phone to have a chat with them. Here we go.
Yeah, well, today's meeting was good and constructive, and there was a real sense of unity between the European leaders that were there and President Trump and President Zelensky. And we had two material outcomes. The first, on the question of security guarantees, was the agreement that the coalition of willing countries, that's 30 countries already working together on security guarantees, will now work with the US on those guarantees, coordinating, and we have already commissioned our teams to do the detailed further work on that. That's really important for security in Ukraine, for security in Europe, and for security in the United Kingdom. The other material outcome was the agreement that will now be a bilateral agreement between President Putin and President Zelensky. That was after a phone call between President Trump and President Putin during the course of this afternoon, followed by a trilateral, which will then add in President Trump. And that is a recognition of the principle that on some of these issues, whether it's territory or the exchange of prisoners, or the very serious issue of the return of the children, that is something where Ukraine must be at the table. And so these were the two outcomes that were the most important coming out of today. They're positive outcomes. There was real sense of unity. We've made real progress today. Thank you very much.
I am very pleased to hear there at the end of Keir Starmer's statement that they're talking about the thousands of Ukrainian children who were effectively kidnapped or stolen and taken into Russia. And the problem with that is that many of the Ukrainian children will grow old into their junior lives and not really know who they are. We're talking about very young children. And that really must be dealt with as soon as possible. That is one of the biggest tragedies and should be manifesting itself in terrible protests. I think it should be. It is a terrible, terrible outcome of this war on the Russian side. Shall we have a chat with Mandy in Cambridge? We're talking about people losing friends over politics. Hello to you, Mandy.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I've just been a little bit distracted from what you've just been playing before. And what's still playing on my screen at the moment.
Yes.
Talking about politics, does that man think he rules the world?
Who are we talking about? Starmer, Putin, Zelensky?
Starmer's no way going there, is he? I mean, the prat, to be truthful with you, but Trump is just so trumped up that, to be truthful with you...
Well, he does have the might of America behind him. He has the might of, shall we say, the world's policeman, which so often America has been over the decades.
Unfortunately, yes. However, let's go back to our politics.
Absolutely, go ahead.
How we care about. So, my best friend has always been a Labourite, from probably being born to bred, because